The fluorescent lights buzzed. Two men shoved a woman toward the restroom door. Jack Reeves stood 10 feet away, groceries in hand, watching his son disappear into the men's room. He didn't move. Not yet. The woman's scream sliced through the cold air. Sharp, desperate. 30 seconds. That's how long it took him in Kandahar to neutralize 4 hostiles. But this wasn't a mission. This was aisle 7 of a suburban grocery store on a Tuesday night. And the last time Jack made a split-second call, an innocent man died because of him. His hands, callous, steady, trained to kill, began to shake. The attackers didn't see his face. They didn't know what he was. They didn't know about the 3 years he'd fought to become someone his son could look up to, or the debt he still owed to the ghost that followed him. What they were about to learn would change everything. But first, Jack had to choose: save a stranger or protect the only person who still believed he was good. Jack Reeves had learned to measure time in heartbeats. 3 years ago, each pulse brought him closer to drowning in whiskey and regret. Now at 52, every beat reminded him why he'd climbed out. The grocery store on Maple Street was nearly empty at 8:30 on a Tuesday. He pushed the cart slowly, letting 8-year-old Lucas pick out cereal boxes. The boy's hair stuck up in the back, still damp from soccer practice. These Tuesday night runs were their tradition. 6 months running normal father-son time. He'd been discharged from the Navy SEALs 7 years ago, with honors and nightmares. His wife Rachel had understood, held him through the worst of it. Then breast cancer took her in 6 months, and Jack discovered his training meant nothing against an enemy he couldn't fight. The bottle became his mission. Lucas became collateral damage. The family court judge had been clear. One more incident, and Lucas would go to Rachel's sister permanently. Jack had rebuilt himself from wreckage one day at a time, moved them to this small town where he could just be dad. Lucas turned, holding up 2 boxes. "Which one, Dad?" Jack studied them with mock seriousness. "Left one's got more marshmallows." Lucas grinned and tossed it in the cart. They moved through aisles in comfortable rhythm. Frozen pizza denied. Ice cream sandwiches negotiated. These were the moments Jack lived for now. Ordinary negotiations that felt like breathing after years of suffocating. The restroom hallway was tucked behind the deli counter, narrow with concrete walls and industrial yellow paint. Lucas was bouncing on his toes. "Go ahead. I'll wait here." The boy disappeared through the door, and Jack leaned against the wall. The fluorescent light flickered, reminding him of a Humvee's failing headlamp in Helmand Province. He closed his eyes, willing the memory away. Different country, different life, different man. He counted his breaths. In for 4 hold, for 7 out, for 8. Then he heard it. A woman's voice, raised in protest, cut off mid-word. The solid thump of a body hitting a wall. Jack's eyes snapped open. 2 men were dragging a woman toward the women's restroom 10 feet away. Movements quick and practiced. She wore a server's uniform. One man had her arm twisted. The other pushed open the restroom door. Professional, coordinated. Jack's mind cataloged details automatically. White male, 6'2", leather jacket. Hispanic male, 5'10", gym build. Both carrying, probably, knives. Jack froze. Every instinct screamed at him to move to neutralize the threat. 30 seconds, that's all it would take. But his feet stayed planted because Lucas was 15 feet away. Because the last time Jack let training take over without thinking, he'd killed the wrong man. A shopkeeper in Kandahar who'd reached for his phone. Intel said hostile. Intel was wrong. The man had a daughter, 12 years old. Jack learned that during the inquiry that cleared him but couldn't clear his dreams. The woman screamed, sharp, desperate. The man with the leather jacket clamped a hand over her mouth, and they disappeared into the restroom. The door swung shut. The store's music continued its cheerful loop. Jack's hands were shaking now. That fine tremor from after firefights when adrenaline had nowhere to go. 30 seconds. He could end this or grab Lucas and walk away. Call 911 from the parking lot. Let someone else be the hero. The men's room door opened. Lucas emerged, grinning at some private joke. He saw his father's face, and the grin faded. Dad Jack saw himself through his son's eyes, frozen, pale hands clenched. Everything they'd built over 3 years balanced on his next choice. The woman screamed again, muffled, and Jack felt something crack inside him. He couldn't walk away. Rachel's voice was in his head, the last thing she'd said. "Promise me you'll teach him to be brave, not fearless." Brave. There's a difference. Jack met Lucas's eyes. "Stay here, don't move. If I'm not back in 1 minute, you run. Get the clerk. Call 911. Don't come looking for me. Understand? Lucas nodded, eyes wide. Jack turned toward the women's restroom. His hands stopped shaking. The tremor vanished, replaced by cold mechanical calm. He was moving before doubt could root him in place. The restroom door was heavy commercial grade. Jack caught it before it could swing shut, easing it open in silence. Small space, 3 stalls, 2 sinks, hand dryer. The woman was on the floor, leather jacket kneeling on her back, hand over her mouth. The second man pulled duct tape from his pocket. Neither heard Jack enter. Classic mistake. Never assume you're the apex predator. Jack took 2 steps. Leather jacket registered movement too late. Jack's elbow caught the man's temple with surgical precision. Leather jacket went sideways, and Jack followed. Knee driving into the solar plexus. No air, no fight. The second man dropped the tape hand, going for his waistband. Jack saw the knife. Fixed blade, 4 inches, amateur grip. Jack closed distance, trapped the weapon hand, drove his forehead into the bridge of the man's nose. Cartilage crunched. Blood sprayed. The knife clattered. 15 seconds. Jack swept the man's legs, put him face down, knee between shoulder blades. Leather jacket was rising, hand going to his boot. Backup weapon. The woman scrambled backward. Stay down. Jack's voice flat, command clear. Leather jacket found his knife. Serrated and nasty. He came up fast. Jack had half a second to decide. Lethal or non-lethal? His body wanted lethal. Throat strike, crush the windpipe. But that was the old Jack who'd killed a shopkeeper. This Jack waited until the knife committed, stepped inside the attack, deflected, delivered a hammer fist to the jaw. Leather jacket dropped. 28 seconds. Jack was breathing hard. The man under his knee had stopped struggling. Jack increased pressure, and the man went still with a whimper. The woman stared from the floor, hand pressed to her throat. Her name tag read Rebecca, younger than he'd thought, maybe 25. Her eyes held something beyond fear. Recognition of something. Are you hurt? Rebecca shook her head slowly. Who are you? She whispered. Jack glanced at her. Can you move? She nodded, getting up. Tape. Bring it here. And their phones. She moved quickly, efficiently. Not shock behavior. Jack kept weight on the man while Leather Jacket groaned. Rebecca, Jack said, we're going to have a conversation. You're going to tell me why these two wanted you badly enough to try this in a public place. Rebecca handed him the tape. Their eyes met. Hers were dark brown, filled with guilt, calcified into purpose. She knew these men. Jack taped both men's wrists and ankles. Efficient, secure. Who sent you? Neither answered. He sat back, wiping blood from his knuckles. The restroom was wrecked. Blood on floor, hand dryer hanging crooked. Rebecca stood with her back to the sinks, arms wrapped around herself, but her eyes were calculating, not scared. You have about 3 minutes before someone comes looking, Jack said. Police response time is 6 to 8 minutes. So decide, do you want to be here when they arrive? Rebecca's jaw tightened. Who are you? She asked again. Jack stood, rolling his shoulders. Someone who used to do things like this for a living. But that was a long time ago, and I'm just here buying groceries with my son. Your turn. Rebecca looked at the men on the floor, then back at Jack. My father, she said. They work for the man who killed my father, and they know I've been talking to the FBI. Jack felt ice water flood his veins. FBI. Organized crime. Professional silencing attempt, which meant more would come. Jack thought about Lucas waiting in the hallway, about the life he'd built. All of it about to come apart. Listen carefully, Jack said, voice dropping into command register. These two aren't the problem. The problem is whoever sent them. When they don't report back, more will come. Better trained, better equipped. You need to disappear. Right now, tonight. Do you have somewhere safe? Rebecca shook her head. There's a bus station 3 blocks north, he said. Buy a ticket with cab, at least 2 states away. Ditch your phone, no credit cards. Don't contact anyone. Understand? Rebecca hesitated, then pulled out a crumpled business card. FBI Special Agent Connor Mitchell. Tell him Rebecca sent you. Tell him about Walter Kent. Jack pocketed the card. Thank you, she said, raw and genuine. Then she was gone. Jack was alone with 2 semi-conscious attackers. He pulled out his phone, dialed 911, gave bare facts. 2 men attempted assault Morton's Grocery on Maple Street. Suspect secured, then hung up before she could ask his name. He stepped into the hallway. Lucas was pressed against the wall, face white, eyes huge. Jack's heart cracked. This was exactly what he'd spent 3 years preventing. But through the store's front windows, Jack saw what he'd been dreading. A black SUV pulling into the parking lot, moving too fast. No headlights. 3 men climbed out, moving with purpose. Not here for groceries. Jack grabbed Lucas's arm. "We need to leave right now, out the back." Lucas's voice was small. "Dad, what's happening?" Jack pulled his son toward the rear exit, something I should have dealt with a long time ago. The back exit opened onto a loading dock. Jack could hear sirens, distant but approaching. Good. Police would find the two in the restroom. Maybe slow the SUV, maybe. Jack and Lucas hit the parking lot running, heading for his battered Ford F-150. Keys out. Engine starting before Lucas had his seatbelt fastened. Dad, Lucas started. "Not now, buddy. I promise I'll explain. But right now, trust me and stay quiet." "Can you do that?" Lucas nodded, jaw set. Brave. Jack threw the truck into reverse, tires squealing. 2 blocks away, Jack saw the SUV in his rear view. It had circled around. Smart, persistent. The SUV accelerated, closing distance. Jack's truck was older, heavier, less maneuverable. But he knew these streets. The SUV was faster straight. But Jack didn't plan on going straight. He took a hard right onto Oakwood, the truck protesting. Lucas grabbed the door handle, eyes wide but silent. Good kid. Jack knew where he was going, the old quarry on the east side. Closed for 2 years. The road up was gravel, narrow, full of switchbacks. The SUV's low profile would be a disadvantage. He pushed the accelerator down. 50 past 60. Too fast for residential streets, but Jack had run out of options. The SUV matched their speed 3 car lengths back. The driver was mid-30s, focused, professional. Not emotional, just doing a job. Lucas's voice cut through engine noise. "Dad, are we going to die 8 years old, learning the world had teeth?" Jack kept his eyes on the road. "No, I'm not going to let that happen." The turnoff to the quarry appeared. Jack yanked the wheel and the truck fishtailed onto gravel. Loose stones pinging steering wheel, fighting his grip. 4-wheel drive engaged. In the mirror, the SUV took the turn and started to slide, but the driver was good. The SUV straightened and kept coming. The quarry road climbed switchbacks tighter. Jack took each turn faster than smart. The SUV was losing ground. Low clearance, scraping on rocks. Not enough. Jack saw it ahead. The old access gate, closed and chained, rusted chain, brittle gate, worth a shot. Jack aimed for center, accelerated. Lucas braced. The impact was tremendous. Metal shrieking as the gate tore from hinges. The chain snapped. The truck bucked and Jack fought to keep them on the road. Behind them, the SUV slowed, unwilling to risk the same. The hesitation bought 20 seconds. The quarry was a massive limestone bowl, 100 feet deep. The road ended at an overlooked platform, nothing but air beyond. Jack slammed brakes, sliding to a stop 10 feet from the edge. No way forward. No way out except back where the SUV was cresting the final turn. Jack killed the engine. Grabbed Lucas. Out. Stay behind the truck. Do not move unless I tell you. They tumbled out into cold night air. The quarry smelled like stone dust and old rain. The SUV's headlights swept across them. 3 men climbed out, coordinated, better equipped. The lead man had a gun visible in a shoulder holster. The other 2 spread out, flanking. Jack stepped away from Lucas, putting himself between his son and the threat. Empty hands, no phone, no weapons, no plan, except buy time and hope Lucas could run if it went wrong. The lead man stopped 20 feet away, outside hand-to-hand range. "Smart, Commander Reeves," the man said, calm voice, southern accent. "That's a name we hadn't expected tonight." Jack's blood turned to ice. They knew who he was, knew his rank. This was targeted. "I don't know what you think you know," Jack said, "but you've made a mistake. Walk away now." The lead man smiled without warmth. "I'm afraid we're past that point. You interfered with a sanctioned operation. You made yourself relevant. That's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Sanctioned, not mob hitmen, something government adjacent." Jack's mind raced. If these men had institutional backing, this was bigger, darker. "Let the boy go," Jack said. Whatever this is about, he's not part of it. He's 8 years old. The lead man glanced at Lucas. That's exactly why we can't. Liability mitigation. It's not personal, Commander, just operational necessity. Jack understood perfectly. These men were going to kill him and Lucas because loose ends were unacceptable. Everything Jack had built was about to end. Unless the lead man's hand drifted toward his holster. The two flankers were moving, getting into position. 30 seconds before they made their move. Jack had no good options, but he had one bad one. One last mission. He turned slightly, catching Lucas's eye. His son was crying silently, but his hands weren't shaking. Brave, Lucas, Jack said softly, when I move you. Run straight back the way we came. Don't look back. Don't stop. Find someone. Tell them to call Special Agent Mitchell, FBI. Say Rebecca sent you. Understand, Lucas's voice was a whisper. Dad, no. Jack cut him off. I love you, buddy. Every single day of the last 3 years, you've been the reason I kept going. I need you to be brave one more time. Can you do that for me? Lucas nodded, tears streaming. The lead man was giving orders, but Jack wasn't listening. He was counting heartbeats, measuring distances. 3 men, 3 weapons, 20 feet against a 52-year-old construction worker with 3 years of rust. But Commander Jack Reeves wasn't dead. He'd just been sleeping. Jack moved. He didn't go for the lead man. That was expected. Jack sprinted left toward the flanker. The man's hand was halfway to his weapon when Jack closed distance. Straight tackle, and they went down hard. Jack drove his elbow into the man's throat. Felt cartilage give. The gun clattered into darkness. Jack grabbed gravel and threw it at the second flanker's face. Bought 2 seconds. The lead man had his weapon out, tracking, trying for a clean shot. But Jack was moving, rolling, using the downed man as cover. The lead man hesitated, didn't want to hit his own guy. That hesitation cost him. Jack came up with the downed man's Glock. Muscle memory took over. Sight picture, breath control, trigger press. The shot echoed. The lead man staggered, hit center mass. He went down. The second flanker cleared his vision, bringing his weapon up. Jack fired twice. Both connected. The man crumpled. 3 seconds, 3 targets, 3 shots. Just like training, except his hands were shaking now. The gun feeling 50 pounds. Jack stood on unsteady legs, weapon raised, sweeping for threats. Nothing. The quarry was quiet except for ragged breathing and Lucas sobbing. Jack lowered the gun, let it fall. His hands were sticky with blood. He turned. Lucas was still there. Hadn't run. Brave, stubborn kid. Jack crossed the distance and pulled his son into his arms. Lucas clung to him, shaking, crying into his shoulder. Jack held him, one hand cupping his son's head, the other wrapped around small shoulders. I'm sorry, Jack whispered. I'm so sorry you had to see that. They stood there while sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had heard the shots. Police were coming. Jack would have to explain all of it. The grocery store, the chase, the shooting. 3 bodies. He'd have to explain Rebecca and Walter Kent and whatever conspiracy sent trained killers. He'd have to explain to Lucas why his father knew how to kill 3 men in 3 seconds. But for now, Jack just held his son and felt the weight of what he'd done, what he'd had to become again. The police arrived with lights and noise and shouted orders. Jack released Lucas, slowly raised his empty hands. My name is Jack Reeves, he called out. Former Navy SEAL, 3 hostiles down, no civilians injured. I need to speak with FBI Special Agent Connor Mitchell. It's about Rebecca and Walter Kent. Officers approached cautiously, weapons drawn. Jack stood perfectly still. Lucas pressed against his side. One officer cuffed him. Standard procedure. Another checked the 3 men calling for ambulances. A third talked into his radio about multiple casualties in Federal Liaison. They separated Jack from Lucas. That hurt worse than any injury. Lucas was crying, reaching. Dad? Jack met his son's eyes. It's okay, he said, trying to sound calm. I'm not going anywhere. I promise we're going to be okay. They put Lucas in one patrol car, Jack in another. Through the window, Jack could see his son's pale face, 8 years old, too young for any of this. Too young to learn his father was capable of killing. The drive to the station was silent except for radio chatter. This town had been a refuge. Now it was a crime scene. The station processed Jack with weary respect. Fingerprints, photos holding cell. They left the cuffs on. He just killed 3 men. Protocol demanded caution. 2 hours passed. Jack sat on the bench and tried not to think about Lucas alone probably being questioned. Finally, the door opened. A man in a dark suit entered. Early 40s, tired eyes. "Commander Reeves," he said. Jack stood. The man waved him down. "Special Agent Connor Mitchell, FBI. We've met before. Task Force 7 Kandahar, summer of 2013. Jack searched his memory. Mitchell smiled slightly. "Junior liaison. You pulled me out when things went sideways. You told me I looked like an accountant. That sparked something. A firefight. A frightened analyst." "The accountant who couldn't work his safety," Jack said. Mitchell nodded. "I got better. You saved my life." Jack wasn't sure where this was going. "Is this about Rebecca?" Mitchell pulled out a chair. "It's about a lot of things. Rebecca Wright is in protective custody. She called from Harrisburg. Told me what happened." He paused. Edmund Wright was her father, retired accountant, DOJ. Stumbled onto something he shouldn't have. A contract enforcement arm operating inside the U.S. Technically legal under obscure counterterrorism statutes. Practically a hit squad. Wright collected evidence. They killed him. Made it look like a heart attack. Rebecca's been finishing what he started. Mitchell slid a folder across the table. Photos, documents, organizational charts. High-level officials. Defense contractors. Intelligence brass. This got those men sent after her. And you, Jack, studied the documents, pieces clicking. "They knew who I was." How Mitchell's expression darkened. "You were on a list. Former operators with specific skill sets who'd left under less than ideal circumstances. Your name was flagged 3 years ago during those court proceedings. Someone high up took interest." Jack felt cold rage. "They've been watching me." Mitchell nodded. "And when you interfered tonight, you became a problem. The 3 men at the quarry were cleanup. Permanent." Jack closed the folder. "What happens to Lucas?" That was the only question that mattered. Mitchell met his eyes. "That depends on you. We need your testimony. With your statement and Rebecca's evidence, we can pull this apart, but it'll take time and it'll be dangerous. These people don't leave loose ends." Jack understood. Cooperate, become a witness, put himself and Lucas in crosshairs, or refuse. Hope whoever was behind this decided he wasn't worth the trouble. Neither option was good. "What kind of protection?" Jack asked. Mitchell's answer was immediate. Witness protection, full relocation, new identities, new location. Federal marshals until trials are over. It's not perfect, but it's the best we can offer. New identities, new life. Everything Jack and Lucas had built, gone. The house, the school, the Tuesday night runs, all erased. Jack thought about Lucas's face, pale and scared. Thought about Rachel's grave he visited every Sunday. Leaving meant abandoning all that, but staying meant risking Lucas's life. That wasn't a risk Jack could take. "I want to see my son," Jack said. "I want to talk to him before I decide." Mitchell stood. "He's with a social worker now." "But yes, and Commander, I think you did the right thing tonight. Not the easy thing, the right thing." They brought Lucas to a small conference room. The boy's eyes were red, but he wasn't crying now. He ran to Jack. Jack held his son, memorizing the weight of him, the way his hair smelled like cheap shampoo and soccer field grass. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked. "I'm okay," Jack said. "Are you?" Lucas pulled back. "Those men, you killed them." Not a question, just a statement. Jack wanted to lie to soften it, but he'd promised himself no more lies to Lucas. "Yes," Jack said, "because they were going to kill us, and I couldn't let that happen." Lucas was quiet. "In the truck you told me to run, but you weren't going to run. You were going to stay and fight so I could get away." Jack's throat tightened. "Yes." Another silence. "Mom told me once that you saved people, that before I was born, that was your job." Jack remembered that conversation. Rachel explaining to 5-year-old Lucas why Daddy had to go away sometimes. "That's right," Jack said. "That was my job." Lucas nodded slowly. "And tonight, that woman and me, you were doing that job again." Jack wanted to explain it was more complicated, but looking at his son, trying so hard to make sense of something senseless, Jack chose his words carefully. "Tonight I protected people who couldn't protect themselves. That's all I ever tried to do. Sometimes I made mistakes. But tonight I did what I had to do to keep you safe. Lucas thought about that. Are we in trouble? So direct, so practical. We're safe right now, Jack said. There are people who will help us stay safe, but things will change. We might have to start over somewhere new. I know that's scary, but I promise I'll be with you. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together. Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then will we still do grocery shopping on Tuesdays? The question broke Jack's heart. Of all the things they might lose, Lucas was worried about their tradition. I don't know, Buddy, Jack said honestly. But wherever we end up, we'll find new traditions, new normal things that are just ours, I promise. Lucas nodded. Then he looked up with eyes too old for eight. Dad, those men you fought, were they bad people? Jack considered. In his old life, enemies had been clear-cut. Tonight's enemies had been American citizens, possibly under government authority. But Lucas needed an answer he could understand. They were people who made bad choices, Jack said. They were trying to hurt innocent people, and they were going to hurt us too, covered up. So yes, they were bad people doing bad things. Lucas seemed satisfied. Okay, I'm glad you didn't let them hurt us. Jack pulled his son close. Me too, buddy. Agent Mitchell returned with paperwork. Witness protection would begin immediately. Safe house short-term while arrangements were finalized. New names, new backgrounds, marshals until trials concluded. Months, maybe years. Jack signed papers, asked questions, made sure Lucas's education would continue, that counseling would be available. The mechanics of disappearing were complex. Every connection severed, every routine abandoned. They couldn't tell anyone where they were going. Rachel's sister would get a call saying they were fine, but couldn't be contacted. School would be told they'd moved. The house would be sold by a third party. Everything tied off cleanly. It was efficient, necessary, and it felt like dying. They left the station before dawn in an unmarked sedan with two marshals. Lucas fell asleep against Jack's shoulder. Jack stared out the window as the town slipped past. The grocery store cordoned with police tape, their trucks still at the quarry. Their house, Lucas's room with his posters, the kitchen where Jack had learned to cook, sober the backyard with tomatoes that would never be harvested. All left behind. Jack felt the weight pressing down. He'd wanted so badly to be normal. But the war he thought he'd left had been waiting all along. The safe house was anonymous ranch style in a suburb 2 states over. Bland neutrals, serious security system. The marshals showed them panic buttons, explained protocols. Lucas took it in with wide eyes. This was an adventure to him, or trying to be. Children were resilient. Jack was grateful. When the marshals left them alone, Jack made breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast, simple and familiar. They ate in silence. The kitchen had a window looking out on a backyard that wasn't theirs. Everything starting over again. Finally, Lucas spoke. What do we do now? Jack set down his fork. We live. We stay safe. We help the good guys. And we figure out what comes next. One day at a time. It sounded like an AA slogan, but it was all Jack had. One day at a time. Building a new life from wreckage. He'd done it before. Could do it again. Had to. Because giving up wasn't an option. Jack looked at his son pushing eggs around his plate. You okay, buddy? Lucas shrugged. I miss home. The words carried the weight of everything they had lost. Jack nodded. Me too. But we'll make this place home. It'll take time, but we will. Remember how bad things were 3 years ago? Look how far we came. We can do it again. Lucas looked up, something in his eyes. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning. Promise, Jack reached across the table, put his hand over his son's. Promise, we're going to be okay. Different than before, but okay. I've got you and you've got me. That's all we need. It was a promise he couldn't guarantee, but it was what both needed to believe. Jack said it like it was true, and Lucas accepted it. They finished breakfast. Clean dishes. Jack showed Lucas the bedroom, bigger than his old room, window facing east. Lucas explored cautiously. It's nice, he said, not enthusiastic, but accepting. 8 years old, learning to make the best of circumstances. So much like his mother. 3 months after that night, Agent Mitchell called with news. Grand jury handed down indictments this morning. 15 people, including 2 congressmen and a deputy director at DOD. We're executing warrants now. It's going to be a media circus, but the core conspiracy is broken. Jack felt something unclench, and Rebecca Mitchell's voice warmed. She's good. Testifying this week, then relocating. She asked me to thank you. Said you saved her life. Jack thought about the woman in the grocery store. She would have done the same. Mitchell laughed. Maybe. But you're the one who actually did it. The trials will start in 6 months. You'll need to testify probably multiple times. But after that, assuming convictions, you and your son can choose. Stay in the program or return to your old identities. Return to their old identities. Go back to that town, that life. Jack tried to imagine it and couldn't. Too much had changed. Lucas had a new name now, new friends. Jack had a new job. Going backward felt impossible. Maybe they'd stay Christopher and Chris Mason. Maybe they'd find a third option. That was for later. For now, Jack said thank you and hung up. He stood in the kitchen of a house starting to feel like home. Lucas was at soccer practice. Dinner needed planning. Normal father stuff. Jack smiled. He could do this, one day at a time. A year passed, then another. The trials concluded with convictions. The conspiracy was exposed. Key players imprisoned. Rebecca started a foundation in her father's name. Mitchell got a promotion. The world moved on. Jack and Lucas Christopher and Chris Mason now legally and permanently stayed in their adopted town. Lucas grew, 10 years old then, 11. He played soccer, learned guitar, brought friends home who knew nothing about Navy SEALs or shootouts. Sometimes Jack caught him looking thoughtful, knew he was remembering, but mostly Lucas was just a kid, which was all Jack had wanted. Jack kept working in construction, saved money, and attended AA meetings. 3 years had become 5, heading toward forever. He visited Rachel's grave once a year, bringing flowers, as telling her about Lucas's achievements. The grave never answered, but Jack didn't need it to. The conversation was with his memory of her, with the version of himself that had loved her and failed her and ultimately honored her by becoming the father she'd wanted. It was enough, more than enough. On a Tuesday evening, 5 years after that night, Jack and Lucas stood in the cereal aisle of their local store. Different store, different state, different life. But the routine was the same. Scanning boxes, debating sugar content, negotiating. Lucas was 13 now, all gangly limbs. He grabbed a box, tossed it in the cart. Jack raised an eyebrow. That's got more sugar than actual grain. Lucas grinned. You're getting soft in your old age, Dad. Jack laughed. Watch it, kid. I can still take you. Just father and son bickering over groceries on a Tuesday night. They finished shopping, checked out loaded bags. Driving home, Lucas asked, do you ever think about it, that night? Jack had known the question would come. Lucas was old enough now to process what he'd witnessed. Sometimes, Jack said honestly, not as much as I used to. Mostly I think about what came after. About us here now, the life we built. Lucas nodded slowly. Mom would have been proud of you. Of us. The words hit Jack like a physical thing, warm and painful and right. Yeah, he managed. Yeah, she would have been. They drove the rest in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've survived something together. Later, after dinner and homework, Jack stood in his son's doorway, watching him sleep. Lucas's face was peaceful, relaxed in a way it hadn't been for months after that night. The nightmares had faded. The fear had loosened. He was healing, growing, becoming whoever he was meant to be. And Jack had given him that. Not perfectly, not without Mon, but he'd done it. Protected his son, kept him safe. Taught him that even when the world showed its teeth, there were people willing to stand between danger and the defenseless. It was the only legacy that mattered. Jack Reeves had saved lives in Kandahar, had taken lives in the quarry, had nearly destroyed himself with grief and alcohol, had rebuilt himself into someone his son could respect, and through it all, the constant was simple. Protect what matters. Fight when you must. Hold on to the people you love. The details changed. Missions became construction. Combat became custody hearings. Teammates became a single 8-year-old boy. But the principle held. Jack had learned that the hard way. But he'd learned it. And in learning, he'd become someone he could live with. Someone Rachel would have recognized. Someone Lucas could call Dad without hesitation or fear. Outside, stars wheeled in ancient patterns. Inside, Jack Reeves closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Tomorrow there would be work and parenting and all the small struggles of ordinary life. But tonight there was peace. Hard-won, complicated, imperfect peace. And for a man who'd spent half his life at war with enemies with himself with the world's cruelties, peace was everything. The story that began in a grocery store restroom that exploded into violence and revelation and choice had found its ending. Not in triumph or tragedy, but in the quiet accumulation of days. In Tuesday night grocery runs and soccer practices. In a son who smiled easily, and a father who'd earned the right to that smile. In redemption achieved not through grand gestures, but through showing up every day, choosing to be better. That was the real victory. The tires of the unmarked sedan crunched over gravel as they approached the safe house. Jack watched through the rear window as the headlights illuminated a modest ranch-style home, its beige siding turned yellow in the artificial light. No distinct features, no personality, the perfect place to disappear. Lucas stirred against his shoulder, eyes fluttering open. "Where are we?" Jack didn't have an answer that meant anything. Somewhere in Pennsylvania. That's all he knew. The marshals had taken a circuitous route, switching cars twice. Standard protocol. One marshal, a stocky woman in her 40s with close-cropped hair, turned to face them. "Home sweet home for now. You'll be briefed on everything inside." Jack nodded gently, nudging Lucas upright as the car stopped. The night air hit them like a physical force after the warmth of the vehicle. Lucas shivered, pressing closer to Jack's side as they walked toward the front door. The taller marshal moved ahead, performing a final check before ushering them inside. The interior matched the exterior. Neutral, forgettable clean. Furnished with mass-produced items that wouldn't draw attention in a catalog or a memory. The female marshal, Diane Garcia, according to her introduction, walked them through the house, pointing out security features with mechanical efficiency. Panic buttons in every room. Direct line to the local field office. Reinforced doors and windows. The fence around the backyard was higher than standard, topped with privacy screens. No one would see them coming or going. Lucas trailed behind, touching nothing, saying less. His eyes cataloged everything with an intensity that squeezed Jack's heart. 8 years old and already learning to assess escape routes, security vulnerabilities. The instinct to protect a child warred with the reality of what that protection now required. By the time the tour finished in the kitchen, Lucas was swaying slightly with exhaustion. Jack guided him to the larger of 2 bedrooms. White walls, blue comforter, no personality beyond what a real estate stager might add to make a property seem lived in. Lucas climbed onto the mattress without bothering to change, curling onto his side. Jack eased off the boy's sneakers, pulled a blanket over him. Lucas's eyes remained open, fixed on his father's face. "Will the bad men find us here?" The question hung between them like smoke. Jack wanted to lie, to offer the absolute certainty that every child deserves. But he'd already broken too many promises. "They're very good at hiding people, Lucas. That's their job, and I'm very good at keeping you safe. That's mine." The answer seemed to satisfy Lucas, whose eyes finally closed. Jack returned to the kitchen, where the marshals waited with a folder of documents. "What happens tomorrow?" he asked. Diane Garcia slid the folder across the table. "Tomorrow you both cease to exist. Christopher and Chris Mason will be born instead. Everything from your driver's license to your son's school records. Learn it, live it, forget who you were." They explained the rules in clinical detail. No contact with anyone from their past lives. No social media, no distinctive habits or hobbies that might identify them. Never mention specific details about their history. A cover story had been created. Widower from Seattle construction worker relocated after a workplace injury for a fresh start. It would be weeks before the new identification would be fully established, months before they'd be moved to a more permanent location. In the meantime, they would remain here isolated, preparing for their new existence. The marshals would stay in the attached garage apartment, always present, always watching. For protection, they emphasized, though, the subtext was clear, to ensure compliance as well. When they finally left Jack alone, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the documents that outlined the death of Jack Reeves and the birth of Christopher Mason. His fingers traced the edges of a fabricated birth certificate, a forged high school diploma, employment records for jobs he'd never worked. The photograph showed his face but belonged to someone else. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten navy blue, fading to gray. Jack hadn't slept in over 24 hours. His muscles ached from tension and exertion. His mind replayed the events at the quarry in vivid, blood-soaked detail. 3 lives ended by his hand. Necessary, unavoidable, but the weight of it pressed against his chest like a stone. He walked to the living room window, parting the blinds with two fingers to watch dawn break over an unfamiliar neighborhood. Neat houses with trimmed lawns, a bicycle left carelessly in a driveway, a sprinkler system activating with mechanical precision. Normal life continuing without pause while his own had been severed completely. Jack wondered if Rachel's sister had been notified, yet if she stood in her kitchen right now, coffee growing cold as she tried to understand the cryptic message about her nephew's safety. If Lucas's teacher was marking him absent, wondering if he had the flu. If the tomato plants in their garden would wither without water. All the small, everyday connections that anchored a life cut loose in a single night. The floor creaked behind him. Lucas stood in the hallway, hair flattened on one side, eyes puffy from too little sleep. Jack crossed to his son, kneeling to eye level. "Hey, buddy, how about some breakfast?" Lucas's gaze drifted to the window to the neighborhood beyond. "Is this where we live now?" Jack guided him to the kitchen, searching through unfamiliar cabinets until he located cereal bowls, spoons. The simple act of preparing breakfast created an island of normalcy in the sea of strangeness. Jack poured milk that someone had stocked in the refrigerator, pushed the bowl toward Lucas. "Eat something. We've got a lot to talk about." Lucas took mechanical bites while Jack explained in simplified terms what would happen next. New names, new town eventually, new school, new start. With each detail, Lucas's shoulders hunched further, spoon moving slower between bowl and mouth. Jack reached across the table, covering his son's small hand with his own. "I know it's a lot. I know it's scary, but we're together. That's what matters." Lucas looked up, eyes swimming with tears that didn't fall. "But what about Mom?" Jack felt the question like a physical blow. "We can't visit her grave anymore. No more Sunday afternoons with flowers and one-sided conversations. No more tangible connection to the woman who had bound them together. We'll remember her," Jack said finally, "every day, in everything we do. No one can take that away, not even the people who want to hurt us." Lucas nodded, a jerky motion that betrayed his effort to be brave. "I want to call her Rachel instead of Mom when I think about her, so I don't forget her real name." The unexpected practicality of this broke Jack's heart anew. He'd been so focused on physical safety, on logistics and threat assessments, that he'd overlooked how Lucas would process the emotional reality of their situation. "Yes," Jack agreed, swallowing around the tightness in his throat. "That's a good idea." Lucas returned to his cereal, the matter settled in his 8-year-old mind. Jack marveled at his resilience even as he mourned the necessity of it. Children shouldn't need to be resilient in this way. They shouldn't need to create memory systems to hold on to their dead mother's names. After breakfast, they explored their temporary home more thoroughly. The backyard was small but private, fenced with solid wooden panels that revealed nothing to neighbors. A covered patio housed a weathered table and chairs. Inside, the spare bedroom had been set up as an office with a desktop computer Garcia had explained was secure but monitored. Every call, every search, every email would be tracked. They found a small collection of children's books on a shelf, toys in a bin that Lucas was too old for. The kitchen was stocked with basic provisions enough to last several days. Everything carefully selected to be adequate but impersonal. Nothing that might trigger recognition or attachment. They were expected to fill this blank slate with a new life manufactured from nothing. By mid-morning, exhaustion caught up with Jack. He settled Lucas with a book and stretched out on the living room sofa, intending to rest for just a moment. When he woke, the quality of light had changed, the afternoon sun slanting through the blinds. Lucas sat cross-legged on the floor, methodically organizing the toy bin by type and size. "I used to do that with my action figures," Jack commented, voice rough from sleep. Lucas didn't look up, hands continuing their sorting work. Did Christopher Mason do that too? Or just Lucas Reeves? The question knocked the air from Jack's lungs. How quickly his son had grasped the fundamental challenge of their new reality, separating who they had been from who they must become. "They're saying we're the same people, just with different names." "But that's not really true, is it?" Lucas continued. "Because Lucas Reeves has a dead mom named Rachel and lives in a house with a swing set and has a best friend named Miguel. Chris Mason has a dead mom with a different name and lives here and doesn't have any friends yet." Jack slid from the sofa to the floor, joining Lucas amid the scattered toys. "You're right, it's not just the names that are different, but the important things stay the same. I'm still your dad. I still love you more than anything in the world. You're still the bravest, smartest kid I know. No matter what they call us. Lucas considered this, then placed a plastic dinosaur precisely in line with others of similar size. I don't feel very brave, he confessed. Jack gathered him close, feeling the slight tremors running through the small body. That's the secret about bravery, buddy. It's not about not being scared. It's about doing what you need to do even when you're terrified. And you're doing that right now. Lucas leaned into the embrace, accepting the comfort, if not entirely believing the words. The marshals returned late afternoon with takeout containers and more paperwork. Agent Garcia sat across from them at the kitchen table while they ate her partner patrolling the perimeter outside. In 2 days, she explained between bites they would have their first meeting with the team psychologist, who would help Lucas process the trauma and adjust to their new circumstances. Jack bristled at the clinical description of his son's emotional state. Lucas isn't a case file. He's a little boy who saw things no child should see, who had to leave behind everything he knows. Garcia's expression softened, professionalism cracking just enough to reveal genuine concern. That's exactly why he needs professional support, Mr. Reeves. Or Mason, I should say. Better start practicing. Jack wanted to argue to assert that he knew what his son needed better than any stranger with a psychology degree. But the truth was he felt utterly unequipped to guide Lucas through this. How could he explain violence to a child when he could barely justify it to himself? How could he help Lucas grieve for their old life while simultaneously forcing him to adapt to a new one? After dinner, they established a tentative routine. Bath time for Lucas, reading together on the sofa, and early bedtime for both bodies and minds, desperate for the oblivion of sleep. Jack lay in the dark of the master bedroom, listening to the unfamiliar creaks of the house, cataloging each sound, unable to fully relax despite bone-deep exhaustion. His mind replayed the moment in the quarry, the cold certainty with which he'd eliminated 3 threats. The mechanical efficiency of violence returned to his muscles like muscle memory, as natural as breathing after years of disuse. He'd spent 3 years building a life defined by peace, by ordinary concerns, and everyday love. It had taken 30 seconds to destroy that construction, to become again the man he'd fought to leave behind. Morning arrived with no answers, just the harsh reality of another day in limbo. Jack showered in an unfamiliar bathroom, dressed in clothes he recognized from his own closet. The marshals had retrieved some of their belongings during the night. The small concession to familiarity only highlighted everything else they'd lost. Lucas approached the day with the adaptability of childhood, exploring every corner of their temporary prison, testing boundaries, both literal and figurative. He discovered a dusty chess set in a closet and convinced Jack to teach him the basic moves, focusing on the task with the same intensity he'd once applied to building elaborate Lego structures. The routine of instruction of knights' moves and pawn structures created a bubble of normalcy that lasted until Agent Garcia appeared with lunch and updates. Lucas retreated into silence at her arrival, chess pieces abandoned mid-game. The marshal noticed but didn't comment, instead addressing Jack directly. The investigation is moving quickly. Mitchell's team executed search warrants at 7 locations yesterday. They've seized documents, electronic records. The media has picked up the story, though your names haven't been released. She slid a tablet across the table, displaying a news website with the headline, FBI raids tied to alleged Black Ops program. Jack scanned the article, reading between carefully worded lines about sources close to the investigation and allegations of extrajudicial operations. The piece mentioned multiple casualties at a location in rural Pennsylvania, but provided no details about the quarry confrontation or Jack's involvement. The journalists clearly knew more than they were writing, constrained by official statements and legal concerns. Garcia retrieved the tablet before Lucas could see it. You should prepare yourself. This will be a major case. High-profile defendants with powerful connections. The trial phase could last years. Jack absorbed this understanding, the implications. Years of testimony. Years of living as Christopher Mason. Years before Lucas could reclaim anything resembling a normal childhood. That afternoon, a package arrived containing workbooks and educational materials for Lucas, an interim solution until more permanent schooling could be arranged. Jack watched his son approach the assignments with mechanical diligence, completing math problems and vocabulary exercises without complaint but without enthusiasm. The joy of learning that had characterized Lucas's academic life before had been replaced by rote compliance. On their third night in the safe house, Jack woke to screaming. He reached the second bedroom in 4 strides, found Lucas tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, eyes open but unseeing, trapped in the liminal space between nightmare and waking. Jack gathered him close, murmuring reassurances, feeling the racing heartbeat gradually slow against his chest. "They were coming to get us," Lucas whispered, when coherent words finally returned. "The men from the quarry, but they had no faces." Jack rocked him gently, knowing no words could fully banish such terrors because they were rooted in truth. The men at the quarry had wanted to kill them. Others might still be looking. The nightmare wasn't entirely fantasy. Lucas refused to return to his own bed, so Jack carried him to the master bedroom, tucking him beneath covers, still warm from his own body heat. He curled protectively around his son, one arm draped over the small form, a physical barrier against both real and imagined threats. Lucas's breathing eventually deepened, but Jack remained awake, a sentry against the darkness. Morning brought a visit from Dr. Eleanor Winters, the promised psychologist. A slender woman in her 50s with silver-threaded dark hair and perceptive eyes behind simple frames. She sat with Lucas in the living room while Jack hovered anxiously in the kitchen, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to provide some privacy. He couldn't hear the specifics of their conversation, just the gentle cadence of Dr. Winter's voice and Lucas's occasional responses, shorter at first, gradually lengthening as the session progressed. After an hour, the psychologist joined Jack in the kitchen, while Lucas remained with a puzzle she'd brought up. "He's processing remarkably well." All things considered, she began accepting the coffee Jack offered. "The trauma is significant, but children are incredibly adaptable. With consistent support, I believe he'll integrate these experiences without lasting psychological damage." She paused, studying Jack over the rim of her mug. "And how are you processing, Mr. Mason?" Jack flinched at the name, still unfamiliar, still feeling like a lie, even as he recognized its necessity. "I'm fine. Lucas is my priority." Dr. Winters nodded, unsurprised by the deflection. "Every parent in your situation says the same thing, and they're all lying to themselves. Your son needs you stable and present. That means addressing your own trauma, not just his." Jack resisted the urge to dismiss her concerns. The weight of the past days pressed against his composure, threatening to crack the facade of strength he'd maintained for Lucas's benefit. "What happened at the quarry?" "I've seen combat before, taken lives before. This isn't new territory for me." Dr. Winters set down her mug, eyes never leaving his face. "But this is the first time your son watched you kill. The first time your violence and your fatherhood collided so directly. Don't pretend that isn't its own unique trauma." The accuracy of her assessment left Jack momentarily speechless. He'd been so focused on how Lucas had witnessed violence that he'd avoided confronting how he felt about Lucas witnessing him commit it. Their conversation was interrupted by Agent Garcia, who entered without knocking, tension evident in her posture. "We need to move up the timeline." Her voice was low, urgent. "There's been a development." Dr. Winters gathered her materials without question, promising to continue the session at their next location. Jack felt ice spreading through his veins as he moved to collect Lucas. Garcia pulled him aside while her partner helped Lucas gather his few belongings. "We've identified a leak. Someone accessed the initial safe house allocation records. We don't think they've located you yet, but we're not taking chances." Jack processed this, the professional part of his brain, calculating threat levels and response options, while the father in him fought rising panic. They left within 30 minutes this time in a black SUV with tinted windows, similar enough to the vehicle that had pursued them that Lucas froze momentarily at the sight of it. Jack lifted him into the back seat, buckling him in with steady hands that belied his internal turmoil. "It's okay, buddy. These are the good guys, remember?" Lucas nodded, unconvinced, but trusting his father's judgment. The SUV pulled away from the safe house, following a route that seemed deliberately circuitous. Jack maintained situational awareness from habit, noting turn sequences, watching for signs of surveillance or pursuit. In the front passenger seat, Agent Garcia made calls on a secure line, her voice too low to overhear specific details. They drove for hours, crossing state lines, stopping only for fuel at prearranged locations where they didn't exit the vehicle. Lucas dozed intermittently, exhausted by stress and the monotony of travel. Jack maintained his vigil, dividing attention between the passing landscape and his son's sleeping face, searching both for signs of danger. Late afternoon found them approaching a small town whose welcome sign proclaimed, "Lakewood, a place to call home. Population 6213." The irony wasn't lost on Jack. They turned onto progressively smaller roads until reaching a development of modest homes on the outskirts of town. The SUV slowed before a single-story house with white siding and blue shutters, more distinctive than their previous safe house, but still unremarkable in its middle-class normalcy. "This is more permanent," Garcia explained as they parked in the attached garage door, closing behind them before they exited the vehicle. "The community's been vetted. Cover story is in place. You're already registered in local systems. Utilities, property tax. Christopher Mason exists here." Jack felt the weight of the name settling onto his shoulders, a mantle he must now wear convincingly or risk everything. The interior of the house surprised him, furnished not with the generic pieces of the safe house, but with items that might genuinely belong to the fictional Christopher Mason. Family photos on the wall showed Jack and Lucas clearly digitally altered to place them in locations they'd never visited, with backgrounds suggesting a life in saddle. School certificates for Chris Mason, Little League trophies, a fishing rod mounted above a stone fireplace. Lucas wandered through the space, touching objects that supposedly belonged to him, but that he'd never seen before. A backpack with his new name embroidered on the front. Books on shelves that matched reading levels and interests similar to his own. In his bedroom, a comforter featuring dinosaurs, a passion Lucas had developed the previous year. Who did all this, Jack asked, unsettled by the thoroughness of the fabrication. Garcia's expression remained neutral. "We have teams that specialize in establishing identities. The more realistic the environment, the more quickly you both adapt, the more convincingly you live your cover." They spent the evening learning the layout of the house, reviewing documentation about their new community. Lucas would start at Lakewood Elementary in 3 days, entering third grade mid-semester with a backstory about his father's job relocation following his mother's death 2 years prior. Jack would begin work at a local construction company where the owner had been briefed on the bare minimum, that Christopher Mason was under protection for reasons that couldn't be disclosed. After Lucas finally succumbed to sleep in a bedroom decorated for a child who didn't exist, Jack sat on the back porch, staring into the darkness of an unfamiliar yard. Agent Garcia joined him, passing a mug of coffee that smelled stronger than the bland brew from the safe house. "I know this is surreal," she said after a moment. "The fake photos, the manufactured life. It helps in the long run, even if it feels wrong now." Jack cupped the mug between his palms, absorbing its warmth. "When I was deployed, I had multiple cover identities. Different names, different backgrounds. I could slip into them like changing clothes." He took a sip, the coffee bitter and bracing. "But this is different. I'm not just pretending for a mission duration. I'm erasing Jack Reeves permanently. And I'm asking my son to do the same thing." Garcia considered this face half illuminated by light spilling from the kitchen window. "Children adapt better than adults. In 6 months, Chris Mason won't feel like a fake name to your son. It'll just be who he is. The transition is harder on the parents. Always." Jack wondered how many families she had shepherded through this process, how many identities she had midwifed into existence. The marshals departed the next morning, leaving behind emergency contact protocols and a schedule of check-ins. Their protection would continue, but at a distance. Surveillance teams rotated through the neighborhood, unmarked and unobtrusive. Jack and Lucas were officially on their own, expected to begin integrating into their new community immediately. Jack drove Lucas around town in a Honda Accord that apparently belonged to Christopher Mason, complete with service records and insurance documentation. They located the elementary school, the grocery store, the park with a baseball diamond where Little League games were played on weekends. Lucas observed everything through the passenger window face, serious, absorbing details like intelligence to be analyzed later. They stopped for lunch at a diner on Main Street, sliding into a vinyl booth beneath faded photographs of local landmarks. Lucas studied the children's menu with unusual concentration, as if making the perfect selection might somehow stabilize their shifting world. A waitress approached, smile professional but eyes curious. Newcomers were clearly notable in a town this size. "Welcome to Lakewood," she said, setting water glasses on the table. "I'm Maggie. You folks just move in." Jack felt Lucas tense across from him, their cover story facing its first test. "We did?" Jack confirmed, summoning a smile that felt wooden. I'm Christopher. This is my son, Chris. We're from Seattle originally. Lucas remained silent, eyes fixed on his placemat. Maggie continued chatting as she took their order, offering tidbits about local events and recommendations for services. Each question about their background was a potential trap, requiring Jack to recall details from the dossier without hesitation or contradiction. By the time she left to place their order, sweat had gathered at his hairline despite the diner's aggressive air conditioning. You did good, buddy, Jack said quietly when they were alone. Lucas shrugged, tracing the outline of a cartoon character on his placemat with one finger. I didn't say anything. That's okay, too. Sometimes saying nothing is the right move until you're comfortable. Lucas looked up, expression too serious for his age. I don't think I'll ever be comfortable being Chris Mason. The name feels wrong in my mouth, like when you try on someone else's shoes. Jack reached across the table, squeezing his son's shoulder gently. I know, but it's like learning a new skill. Awkward at first, then gradually it becomes natural. Give it time. Their food arrived, temporarily halting the conversation. Jack watched Lucas pick at chicken strips, appetite diminished by stress and displacement. The boy had lost weight in the past week, his face slightly hollowed, clothes hanging looser on his small frame. Another worry to add to the growing list. Another failing Jack couldn't immediately remedy. After lunch, they visited the local hardware store to purchase supplies for minor household repairs. A normal activity for a father and son settling into a new home, but also a necessary cover for Jack to assess potential security vulnerabilities. The store owner engaged them in friendly conversation, clearly recognizing newcomers, offering advice about local contractors and services with genuine neighborliness. Lucas gradually emerged from his silence, asking questions about different tools, demonstrating knowledge from watching Jack's home improvement projects in their real life. Each natural interaction, each moment of genuine engagement, lifted a fraction of the weight from Jack's shoulders. Perhaps they could do this. Perhaps Lucas could adapt without losing himself entirely. That night, Jack stood in the unfamiliar kitchen, preparing pasta from a recipe he'd often made in their old home. Lucas sat at the counter, methodically tearing lettuce for salad, the routine providing comfort through familiarity. For a brief moment, with familiar motions and domestic sounds filling the space, Jack could almost forget they were strangers in a manufactured life. The illusion shattered when Lucas looked up, suddenly eyes widening with realization. My soccer trophy, the one from last season, I left it behind. The panic in his voice matched the importance of the object. Lucas's first team sport achievement, proudly displayed on his bedroom shelf since the previous spring. It's gone, buddy, Jack said gently, like everything else from before. Lucas's face crumpled, the loss of this specific item somehow embodying all they'd been forced to abandon. It's not fair. We didn't do anything wrong. Those men attacked that lady. You were just helping. Why do we have to lose everything? Jack abandoned the cooking, moving to kneel before his son, gathering small hands in his own. You're right, it's not fair. We didn't deserve this. But sometimes life isn't about what's fair. It's about protecting what matters most. And you matter most to me. More than our house, more than trophies, more than anything we left behind. Lucas's tears flowed freely now, the dam of stoicism finally breaking. But I want my real name back. I want my school and my friends and my room. I want to visit Mom's grave on Sundays. I want our life back. Each word struck Jack with physical force. He had no counter-argument, no parental wisdom to offer against such raw truth. Instead, he pulled Lucas into his arms, holding him through the storm of grief, feeling small shoulders shake with the force of sobs too large for an 8-year-old body. I know, buddy, I know. Jack's own eyes burned throat-tight with emotions he couldn't afford to fully release. One of them needed to remain steady, and the burden of that stability fell to him alone. Eventually, Lucas's tears subsided, leaving him limp with emotional exhaustion. Jack carried him to the sofa dinner, temporarily forgotten, and held him until his breathing deepened into sleep. Only then did Jack allow a few silent tears of his own mourning, all they had lost, while Lucas couldn't witness his vulnerability. The first week in Lakewood established their new patterns. Lucas began school, navigating the complex social dynamics of being the new kid mid-year. Jack started at the construction company, grateful for physical labor that demanded full attention, and left little energy for dwelling on what couldn't be changed. They settled into the rhythm of their cover identities, practicing the art of selective truth-telling, sharing genuine experiences and preferences where possible, manufacturing backstory where necessary. Lucas proved surprisingly adept at this balancing act, absorbing the details of Chris Mason's fictional history with the same diligence he applied to multiplication tables. Jack maintained vigilance despite the appearance of normalcy, varying routes to school and work, noting unfamiliar vehicles, assessing strangers with the heightened awareness of a man who knew precisely what threats might look like. At night, he checked locks and security systems multiple times, sleep coming in light intervals punctuated by full alertness at the slightest noise. 1 month into their new lives, Jack received a coded message through the secure channel established with Agent Mitchell. Progress on the investigation. 3 more arrests. Hearing dates set for initial defendants. Each development simultaneously validated their sacrifice and extended its duration. Justice advancing, but still distant, requiring their continued absence from their true selves. Lucas made his first friend at school, a boy named Ethan, who lived 3 blocks away and shared his interest in dinosaurs. The relationship developed with the straightforward dynamics of childhood, common interests, proximity, compatible temperaments. Jack watched it unfold with mingled relief and anxiety, grateful for his son's social connection, but fearful of any inconsistency in their cover story. The friendship necessitated greater integration into community life. Playdates, school events, conversations with Ethan's parents who welcomed the newcomers with casual friendliness that Jack struggled to reciprocate naturally. Each social interaction was a test, a performance that required constant vigilance against slips or contradictions. 3 months after their arrival in Lakewood, Dr. Winters visited for a follow-up assessment. She met with Lucas first, then Jack, in the familiar setting of their new home. "You've both made remarkable adjustments," she concluded as their session ended. "But I'm concerned about your isolation, Christopher. You've established routines, surface-level connections, but no meaningful adult relationships." Jack bristled at the observation, accurate though it was. Relationships mean questions, background checks for close friends, vetting by the marshals. It's simpler to keep people at a distance. Safer. Dr. Winters removed her glasses, cleaning them deliberately before responding. Safer, perhaps, but not healthier. Not for you, and ultimately not for Chris. He's watching how you navigate this new world, learning from your example. The words lingered after she departed, an uncomfortable truth Jack couldn't easily dismiss. He had approached their new life as a tactical problem, focusing on security parameters and cover maintenance. But a life sustained only by vigilance wasn't really living. It was merely surviving. And he wanted more than survival for Lucas. The opportunity to expand their social circle arrived unexpectedly through work rather than Lucas's school connections. Jack's foreman, a gruff veteran named Mike Donovan, invited him to a weekend barbecue. Nothing fancy, just some guys from the crew and their families. Jack's instinct was to decline to maintain the protective buffer around their fabricated existence, but Dr. Winter's words echoed in his mind. He accepted, bringing Lucas and a store-bought dessert to a modest home filled with the comfortable chaos of multiple families. Mike's wife, Caroline, welcomed them with genuine warmth, introducing them to others with the easy confidence of a natural connector. Lucas gravitated toward a group of children playing basketball in the driveway, accepted without question into their game. Jack found himself seated beside Mike, nursing a beer he barely tasted, hyper-aware of every detail that might contradict their cover story. The conversation flowed around him, work complaints, sports debate, it's local politics, until Mike addressed him directly. "You don't talk much about Seattle. Bad memories." The question froze Jack momentarily, mind racing to recall the specific details in his file. Seattle, construction project manager. Wife died of complications from surgery. He manufactured a rueful smile, shrugged one shoulder. Sarah's illness was hard on both of us. After she was gone, the city just felt empty. Mike nodded, understanding in his eyes. Lost my brother in Afghanistan. Know something about places holding ghosts. Sometimes you gotta leave to start breathing again. The genuine sentiment behind the words struck Jack unexpectedly. Here was a connection based on real grief, real understanding, even if the specific circumstances were fabricated. Perhaps authentic relationships were possible within the framework of their new identities after all. As summer approached, Lucas's nightmares decreased in frequency, but not intensity. He would wake screaming images of faceless men and blood-soaked gravel tangled with newer anxieties about being discovered, about losing this tenuous stability they'd established. Jack developed a routine for these nights. Warm milk, quiet conversation, sleeping beside his son until morning, painted the room with normalcy again. At school, Lucas maintained solid academic performance, but struggled with sustained friendships. He would connect briefly, then withdraw, when questions probed too close to forbidden topics. His life before Lakewood, his mother's specific childhood memories that belonged to Lucas Reeves rather than Chris Mason. The pattern concerned Jack, who raised it during their monthly call with Dr. Winters. "He's afraid of getting close, then having to leave again," she explained. "It's a common protective mechanism for children in your situation." The best counter is stability and reassurance. Jack provided both as best he could, creating new traditions to replace those they'd lost. Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday hikes in nearby state parks, Tuesday night chess matches that had evolved from basic instruction to genuine competition. 4 months into their new lives, Jack noticed a black sedan parked 2 blocks from Lucas's school. The vehicle itself wasn't remarkable, a Ford Taurus common enough to blend anywhere. But it appeared 3 days consecutively in slightly different positions, always with a clear view of the main entrance. Jack photographed it, discreetly documented license plates, sent the information through secure channels to Agent Garcia. Her response came within hours. "Not one of ours. Stay alert. Increase surveillance en route." The confirmation of his suspicions sent adrenaline coursing through Jack's system of on-bat readiness, returning with practiced ease. He adjusted his work schedule to personally collect Lucas from school each day, arriving early, positioning himself to observe approaching vehicles and unfamiliar faces. On the third day of this heightened vigilance, Jack spotted the driver. Male, mid-30s, business casual attire, seemingly absorbed in his phone, but positioned for optimal view of the school's exit. A professional conducting surveillance, not an obvious threat, but a clear indication that someone had identified Lakewood as their location, if not their specific identities. Jack resisted the urge to confront the man directly. Instead, he documented everything, maintained normalcy in Lucas's routine while preparing contingency plans. Emergency bags packed and hidden. Escape routes memorized. Safe words established for public situations. The preparations felt grimly familiar. The same protocols he'd established for military operations in hostile territory now applied to a small-town elementary school. Garcia arrived unannounced that weekend, plainclothes and rental car, maintaining their cover while she assessed the situation firsthand. "Preliminary analysis suggests he's private sector," she informed Jack, while Lucas was occupied with homework in his room. "Likely working for a defense contractor with connections to the case. Not government, but concerning nonetheless." The surveillance continued for a week, then abruptly ceased, the sedan and its driver vanishing as completely as they had appeared. The marshals maintained their assessment that it had been investigative rather than operational surveillance, gathering intelligence rather than preparing for action. The immediate danger had passed, but the breach in their security was undeniable. "They've identified Lakewood," Jack stated during a secure call with Agent Mitchell. "It's only a matter of time before they narrow it further." Mitchell's voice carried the weight of difficult decisions. "We're exploring options. A second relocation is possible, but not ideal. Chris has established connections here. More disruption could compound the trauma." Jack paced the kitchen as they spoke, tension manifesting in physical restlessness. "So we wait until they find us specifically. Hope they're just gathering intelligence and not planning something more direct." The edge in his voice betrayed the strain of constant vigilance, of responsibility that never eased. "We're increasing protective details," Mitchell assured him, "adding resources to the investigation to accelerate the legal proceedings. The sooner we get convictions, the sooner this ends." But the timeline remained frustratingly vague. Months at minimum, likely years before the complex case would conclude and they could consider emerging from hiding. That night, Jack dreamed of the quarry again. The cold air, the smell of stone dust, the weight of the Glock in his hand. But in this version, he missed his shots. The lead man smiled as he raised his weapon, aimed not at Jack, but at Lucas. Jack woke, gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the phantom sound of gunfire echoing in his ears. He moved silently through the darkened house, checking locks, peering through blinds, at the quiet street, repeating the security ritual that had become as necessary as breathing. In Lucas's room, he stood watching his son sleep, chest rising and falling, in the peaceful rhythm of childhood. The sight steadied him, reminded him why every sacrifice, every moment of fear and uncertainty was necessary. In the morning, Jack called in sick to work, kept Lucas home from school. They needed a day away from routines and watchful eyes from the constant performance of being the Masons. They drove to a state park an hour from Lakewood, hiked trails through old-growth forest until they found a secluded clearing beside a stream. Lucas skipped stones across the water's surface, momentarily free from the constraints of their fabricated lives. Jack watched, memorizing the sound of his son's laughter, the way sunlight filtered through leaves to pattern his hair with dappled gold. These were the moments worth protecting, worth any price they had to pay. Dad, Lucas called, holding up a perfectly flat stone. "Watch this one." His arm whipped forward, the stone skimming the surface 5 times before disappearing beneath the rippling water. Jack applauded, genuine pride, mixing with relief at this glimpse of carefree childhood preserved despite everything they'd endured. The simple pleasure of the moment crystallized Jack's resolve. He would not allow fear to become the defining feature of their lives, would not permit the threat that followed them to steal Lucas's chance at normalcy. They would remain vigilant, but not paralyzed, cautious, but not captive to anxiety. The men who had forced them into hiding had already taken enough. 6 months into their life in Lakewood, autumn painted the surrounding forest in fire hues. Jack stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling between his palms, watching fallen leaves skitter across the unfamiliar backyard. The house felt different now, no longer a stage set for their fabricated lives, but something approaching home. Lucas's artwork decorated the refrigerator. The bookshelf held volumes they'd purchased together, creating a shared history that belonged exclusively to the Masons. Agent Garcia's monthly visit coincided with the first frost, her government-issue sedan pulling into their driveway as ice crystals still glittered red on the lawn. She accepted coffee with the familiarity of routine settling at the kitchen table while Lucas finished getting ready for school. Progress updates she began without preamble. Grand jury indictments are official. 15 defendants, including 2 congressmen and Assistant Director Kent from Defense Intelligence. Jack absorbed this, measuring the news against the cost they'd already paid. Timeline Garcia's expression remained professionally neutral, but Jack had learned to read the subtle tells in her posture. The first trials are scheduled for spring. 8 months minimum before your testimony would be required. Likely longer with inevitable delays. Jack calculated the math. Nearly 2 years in witness protection by the time they might see an end. Lucas would be 10 years old, having spent a quarter of his life as someone else. Lucas entered the kitchen, backpack slung over one shoulder, more confident in his movements than he'd been during those first tentative weeks. He high-fived Garcia without prompting. Their relationship had evolved from wary observation to something resembling friendly alliance. The transformation created a complicated pride in Jack, both grateful for his son's resilience and aching that such resilience had been necessary. After dropping Lucas at school, Jack drove to the construction site where he'd been working since their arrival. Physical labor provided both cover and therapy. The rhythmic exertion of framing walls and setting foundations allowed his mind respite from constant vigilance. His co-workers had accepted Christopher Mason as one of their own, a widowed father rebuilding his life through honest work, a narrative close enough to truth that he could inhabit it without conscious performance. That afternoon, Jack received an encrypted message on the secure phone he kept separate from his everyday device. Mitchell requesting video conference 8 p.m. Secure channel. Unusual for the FBI agent to bypass the established communication protocols through Garcia. Jack messaged acknowledgement while unease settled between his shoulder blades. Instinct warning that deviation from routine rarely brought good news. Lucas sensed his father's tension during dinner, picking at his food with unusual restraint. "Everything okay, Dad?" Jack forced a smile, conscious of how closely his son monitored his moods, how quickly anxiety transferred between them. "Just work stuff, foundation issues on the Anderson project." The lie came easily, another small betrayal in service of protection. After Lucas was settled with homework, Jack locked himself in the home office, initiated the secure connection through encrypted channels. Mitchell's face appeared on screen, the background suggesting he was working late, federal building lighting casting harsh shadows across tired features. His expression confirmed Jack's apprehension before words were exchanged. "We have a problem. Rebecca Wright was attacked yesterday leaving the federal building in Cincinnati." The words landed like physical blows. "Is she alive?" Mitchell nodded grimly. "Stable condition. Professional hit, single shot from approximately 600 yards. Sniper missed center mass by inches. Either they're getting sloppy or she got lucky. Either way, it changes the threat assessment for all witnesses." Jack's mind raced through tactical implications. If Division 17's remaining operatives had identified and targeted Rebecca, other witnesses, including Jack and Lucas, could be compromised as well. "We need to move again." Relocate. Mitchell's hesitation telegraphed complexity. "We're evaluating options. The breach appears isolated. Rebecca had requested modified restrictions, was living more publicly than recommended." The clarification should have provided reassurance, but Jack recognized strategic omission in Mitchell's careful phrasing. Rebecca had greater freedom because she was a civilian witness whose testimony supported but wasn't critical to the case. Jack, as direct participant and perpetrator of justified homicide against Division 17 operatives, remained high value both as witness and as potential target for retribution. "What aren't you telling me?" Jack pressed years of operational experience, detecting the gaps in intelligence sharing. Mitchell's shoulders squared slightly. "Decision made. We've identified additional surveillance in Lakewood. Different operatives from the previous team, more sophisticated, harder to detect. Our assessment is they're actively mapping patterns, not just confirming location." The confirmation of Jack's worst fears paradoxically calmed him, adrenaline channeling into focused clarity rather than panic. Options. Mitchell outlined 3: enhanced security at their current location, relocation to a higher security facility, or temporary separation. Lucas moved to maximum security, while Jack remained visible as potential bait. The third option died before full articulation, Jack's expression killing it mid-sentence. "We stay together." Mitchell nodded unsurprised. "Then we recommend relocation, somewhere more isolated, less public exposure, hardened security." But the timing, Jack understood the unspoken concern. Lucas had finally established stability. Friends, school progress, a semblance of normal childhood. Uprooting him again would reset the psychological clock, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. "Give me 48 hours to consider alternatives." Mitchell agreed, scheduling another call, ending the connection with instructions to maintain normal routines while exercising heightened vigilance. Jack sat in the darkened office long after the screen went black, calculating risks against benefits, security against normalcy scenarios, spiraling through professional assessment. In Lucas's room, Jack found his son sleeping peacefully, one arm curled around a stuffed triceratops he'd won at the town's harvest festival. The simple vulnerability of childhood preserved despite everything they'd endured. Jack stood watch, mentally cataloging everything he would sacrifice to protect this small, precious life, everything he already had. Morning arrived with unwelcome clarity. Jack prepared Lucas's lunch, packed his backpack, maintained the comforting rhythm of daily routine while hyper-aware of their potential audience. Through the kitchen window, he cataloged cars lining the suburban street, noting a dark sedan parked 3 houses down. Possible surveillance, though too obvious for professionals unless intentionally so. At school drop-off, Jack scanned the perimeter with practiced efficiency, identifying potential overwatch positions, escape routes, security vulnerabilities. Lucas noticed his perceptions sharpened by shared trauma. "You're doing the thing again." Jack forced his posture to relax, his expression to soften. "What thing is that?" "The Navy SEAL thing, where your eyes get all super focused and you look at everything like it might explode." The accuracy of the observation startled a genuine laugh from Jack, momentarily breaking the tension. "Habit from construction, always looking for safety issues." Lucas accepted this with the skepticism of a child who had learned to recognize half-truths, but also understood some questions shouldn't be pressed. He hugged Jack quickly before exiting the car, backpack bouncing as he jogged toward the school entrance, briefly indistinguishable from any other third grader. Jack called in sick to work, using accumulated personal days that Christopher Mason had somehow acquired, along with his fabricated employment history. He spent the morning conducting counter-surveillance, driving circuitous routes through Lakewood, identifying potential observation posts, confirming his suspicions about the dark sedan. Professional operatives rotating shifts, maintaining distance, but definitely focused on the Mason residence. By afternoon, Jack had formulated 3 potential responses, each with its own risk profile. Direct confrontation would force the enemy to reveal capabilities but potentially escalate the situation beyond containment. Escape and evasion would reset their lives but traumatize Lucas further. Enhanced security in place might preserve stability, but only if the surveillance teams weren't advance work for more aggressive action. He collected Lucas from school, maintaining casual conversation about classroom activities and upcoming tests while his peripheral vision tracked a different vehicle, silver SUV, 2 occupants, maintaining consistent distance through turns. Lucas chattered about dinosaur fossils and multiplication tables, the beautiful normality of childhood academic concerns, a surreal counterpoint to the lethal chess game unfolding around them. At home, Jack initiated their rainy day protocol, a series of indoor activities they'd developed during Lakewood's wet spring. Board games, model building, movie marathon. The routine appeared normal to outside observation, while keeping Lucas safely inside without triggering his anxiety. Each window approach, each exterior door check embedded in natural movement, patterns that would appear unremarkable through surveillance equipment. After Lucas was asleep, Jack conducted a meticulous security sweep, checking existing measures while calculating potential enhancements. The house had been selected for defensibility, limited approach vectors, reinforced entry points, panic room disguised as walk-in closet in the master bedroom. Adequate against conventional threats, potentially insufficient against the specialized operators Division 17 might deploy. His secure phone vibrated at precisely 10:00 p.m. Garcia, not Mitchell, voice tight with controlled urgency. Change of plans, extraction team en route. ETA 30 minutes. Pack essentials only. Jack absorbed this with the calm efficiency of operational experience. Threat assessment, Garcia's hesitation communicated more than her words. Active hostiles identified entering Lakewood city limits 40 minutes ago. 3-vehicle convoy, minimum 6 operators based on preliminary surveillance. In Lucas's room, Jack knelt beside the bed, gently waking his son with practiced care to avoid triggering startle responses. "Hey, buddy, we need to go on a little trip." Lucas blinked into consciousness, immediately registering the tension beneath his father's controlled expression. The bad men found us. So perceptive, so attuned to danger. 8 years old and already versed in recognizing existential threats. Jack smoothed sleep-tousled hair from his forehead. "Maybe, probably not, but we're going to be extra careful just in case. Remember our go-bag practice?" Lucas nodded, sliding from bed with the resignation of a child who had anticipated this moment. They had drilled the procedure monthly, pack essentials 30-second limit, prioritize comfort items and necessities. Jack supervised while Lucas efficiently filled his backpack with items they had pre-selected for this scenario. Favorite t-shirts, the dinosaur, a photo album of their Mason life, the chess set they played with every Tuesday. Jack's own packing was similarly efficient. Clothing, documents, weapons. The Glock provided by the marshals remained secured in a biometric safe in his closet, accessible only to him. He removed it now, checking the magazine in action with automatic precision muscle memory from years of service reactivating without conscious direction. 20 minutes after Garcia's call, they waited in the darkened living room, bags by the door lights extinguished. Lucas sat close against Jack's side, small body vibrating with suppressed tension. The waiting was always hardest. Jack had learned this through multiple combat deployments, was learning it again through his son's accelerated education and survival. Anticipation stretched nerves tighter than actual danger. Imagination conjuring threats more terrible than reality usually delivered. Headlights swept across the front yard, 2 vehicles approaching with dim beams, moving with the deliberate pace of operational protocol call rather than the aggressive speed of assault. Jack confirmed the arranged signal pattern before approaching the window recognition codes exchanged through timing and positioning. Clear. They moved quickly to the vehicles. Unmarked SUVs with government plates, 4 agents visibly armed, professional in their efficiency. Lucas climbed into the second vehicle, as instructed, Jack following doors secured before the driver accelerated smoothly away from the curb. The first SUV took point, establishing convoy formation as they navigated residential streets toward the highway. 10 minutes into the extraction, radio communication crackled between vehicles. Garcia's voice tension elevated. Possible pursuit identified. Black sedan, 2 occupants turned onto Route 16 30 seconds after convoy. The information processed through Jack's tactical filter, professional surveillance transitioning to pursuit, suggesting the extraction had been detected despite precautions. The convoy increased speed, maneuvering through sparse late-night traffic with controlled urgency. Lucas pressed closer to Jack's side, sensing the shift in energy despite the absence of explicit explanation. Jack maintained physical contact, one arm around narrow shoulders, steadying presence against escalating danger. The lead SUV suddenly accelerated, driver executing a practiced tactical maneuver to create distance from civilian vehicles. In their SUV, the agent riding shotgun unholstered his weapon, chambering around with practiced efficiency. Jack recognized the transition from precautionary movement to active defensive posture. The threat assessment had escalated. Lucas's breath caught, eyes wide as he registered the weapon. Jack tightened his protective embrace, voice deliberately calm. "It's okay. These guys are really good at their job. They're just being extra careful." The attempted reassurance felt hollow against the visual evidence of imminent threat, but Lucas nodded, trust in his father momentarily outweighing observable reality. Through the rear window, headlights appeared closing distance with purposeful acceleration. The pursuing vehicle had abandoned pretense of covert surveillance, shifting to aggressive interception tactics. Their driver executed a sharp exit from the highway, the convoy abruptly transitioning from main thoroughfare to secondary roads, attempting to use terrain and reduce traffic to create tactical advantage. The pursuing sedan maintained contact, joined now by a second vehicle converging from a parallel road. Coordination indicating planned response rather than opportunistic pursuit. The lead SUV increased separation, creating space for evasive maneuvers, while the communications officer reported their position and situation through encrypted channels. The first impact came without warning, the second pursuit vehicle accelerating alongside their SUV, then swerving sharply into their right rear quarter panel. Professional precision in the maneuver designed to destabilize without disabling, forcing their driver to compensate while maintaining control. Lucas cried out, the sound triggering instinctive protective response. Jack pulled him down below window level, shielding the small body with his own, as their driver executed countermaneuvers, wrestling the vehicle back into stable trajectory. The agent in the passenger seat turned, weapon raised, but held in ready position rather than firing. Rules of engagement unclear without positive identification of hostile intent. The lead SUV abruptly braked, creating deliberate collision with the first pursuit vehicle, tactical sacrifice to disrupt the coordinated attack. Metal screamed against metal as the pursuing sedan's front end crumpled, airbags deploying, temporarily eliminating one threat. Their SUV swerved around the controlled crash, accelerating away as the second pursuit vehicle hesitated, formation disrupted. Sanctuary Point 6 miles ahead, the communications officer reported coordinates confirmed through secure channels. Safe House Delta hardened facility, reinforcements en route. The information registered in Jack's operational awareness as he maintained protective position over Lucas, cataloging options if the extraction team failed to reach the designated security point. The second pursuit vehicle recovered quickly, accelerating to close distance. The distinctive muzzle flash of automatic weapons fire erupted from the passenger window rounds, impacting their rear windshield. Ballistic glass fracturing, but holding. Lucas screamed, the sound primitive with terror, cutting through Jack's combat focus like nothing in his operational experience ever had. Their driver executed evasive patterns while maintaining forward progress toward the safe house, professional discipline overriding the natural instinct to retreat from incoming fire. The agent in the passenger seat returned controlled fire, aimed shots rather than suppressive volume, targeting the pursuit vehicle's engine block and front tires rather than occupants. Jack maintained protective coverage, body curled around Lucas, creating human armor against ballistic threats. His son's small frame shook with silent tears, face pressed against Jack's chest, hands clutching his shirt with desperate strength. "It's going to be okay. I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you." The promises felt simultaneously absolute in intent and tenuous in capability. Jack would die protecting his son, but even that ultimate sacrifice might prove insufficient against determined professional operators. The safe house appeared ahead, nondescript commercial building with reinforced security features, visible only to trained observation. Steel shutters disguised as decorative elements, ballistic glass and commercial framing, defensive positions constructed with architectural subtlety. Their driver accelerated toward the loading dock access point, security doors already rising to receive them. The pursuit vehicle closed final distance, passenger leaning further out the window weapon, transitioning to target their SUV's vulnerable rear tires. The agent in their passenger seat fired precisely 3 rounds in controlled sequence. The pursuit driver's side windshield starred with impact points, vehicle suddenly veering sharply right, control lost as the driver was neutralized. Their SUV cleared the safe house entry point, with minimal clearance security shutters immediately descending behind them, sealing the access point with reinforced barriers. Armed personnel moved with practiced efficiency, establishing defensive perimeter medical response team, approaching the vehicle as doors opened. Jack maintained protective hold on Lucas as they exited, transitioning from vehicle to facility interior under armed escort. The building's exterior commercial appearance masked internal security infrastructure. Reinforced walls, surveillance systems, multiple defensive layers between entry points and secure areas. A bunker disguised as business property, deliberately unremarkable from outside observation. Lucas clung to Jack's side as they were escorted to a windowless conference room converted for temporary shelter. Cots positioned against walls, supplies stacked in organized sections, medical equipment staged for emergency response. A female agent approached with medical kit, focusing first on Lucas' professional demeanor, softening slightly as she addressed the visibly traumatized child. "Let's make sure you're okay, young man. Just a quick check." Jack maintained physical contact as the medic conducted assessment, monitoring vital signs, checking for injuries concealed by adrenaline response. Lucas submitted to examination with the resigned compliance of a child who had learned that resistance was futile, that adult decisions would proceed regardless of his preferences. The realization twisted in Jack's chest. His son was losing normal childhood responses, adapting to crisis with premature maturity. "Clean bill of health," the medic confirmed, offering Lucas a juice box from her supply kit. Small gesture of normalcy amid extraordinary circumstances. She turned professional attention to Jack, noting a laceration along his forearm, sustained during protective maneuvers without conscious registration. He submitted to treatment with the same automatic compliance he recognized in his son, operational mode superseding personal consideration. Agent Garcia arrived 20 minutes later, direct from field coordination, fatigue evident beneath professional composure. She briefed Jack efficiently. Pursuit neutralized 3 hostiles in custody, 2 killed in engagement, safe house security established with additional forces deploying to create defensive perimeter. Tactical victory in immediate terms, strategic implications still developing. What's the long-term plan? Jack pressed voice low to avoid Lucas overhearing as the boy finally succumbed to exhaustion on a nearby cot. Garcia's expression communicated complex calculation, weighing security protocols against practical realities, organizational procedure against human factors. Higher security facility, remote location, minimal external contact until trial phase concludes. Jack absorbed the implications. Further isolation, increased restrictions, additional severance from the tenuous normality they'd established. Lucas would lose his school connections, his emerging friendships, the fragile roots he'd begun to establish. The psychological impact would be significant, compound trauma layered upon existing adaptive challenges. What about a more aggressive option? Jack suggested, operational mind-generating alternatives. Use me as the focal point. Controlled exposure, deliberate visibility. Draw them out against prepared positions. Garcia registered the suggestion without visible reaction. Professional mask firmly in place. Considered and rejected. Risk profile unacceptable, particularly regarding the minor. Lucas stirred restlessly, caught in dreams that twisted his features with distress. Jack moved immediately to his gentle hand on shoulder, providing reassuring contact without fully waking him. The protective gesture highlighted the fundamental challenge, balancing operational security against psychological welfare, physical safety against emotional health. No tactical solution could fully resolve the competing priorities when an 8-year-old boy's well-being hung in the balance. Jack remained beside the cot through the night, alternating between watchful alertness and brief intervals of tactical rest. Combat-conditioned sleep that maintained partial awareness of surroundings. Lucas woke several times disoriented and frightened, requiring reassurance and physical contact before returning to fitful slumber. Each time Jack provided immediate response, steady presence, against the destabilizing reality of their circumstances. Morning arrived with institutional fluorescent lighting rather than natural sunrise, the windowless facility maintaining consistent illumination without reference to external time cycles. Lucas woke, fully momentary confusion transitioning quickly to resigned recognition. Another displacement, another disruption, another loss of tentative stability. Breakfast arrived on institutional trays, nutritionally adequate, aesthetically uninspiring. Lucas picked at scrambled eggs and toast appetite, diminished by stress and uncertainty. Where are we going now? The question carried the weight of experience. A child who understood that current circumstances were temporary, that another relocation, another identity, another adaptation awaited. Jack hesitated, balancing truth against protection. Somewhere safe, somewhere we can stay until all this is over. Lucas processed this with the skepticism of repeated disappointment, learning curve accelerated by trauma. That's what you said about Lakewood. Jack had no counter-argument, no reassurance that wouldn't potentially become another broken promise. He offered what truth he could. I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could make this easier. Agent Mitchell arrived mid-morning suit showing travel wrinkles, expression grim with exhaustion and purpose. He conferred briefly with Garcia before approaching Jack, professional courtesy masking what appeared to be genuine concern. How's he holding up? Jack glanced toward Lucas, currently engaged with a tablet loaded with educational games. Attempted normalcy in surreal circumstances. He's resilient, more than he should have to be. The statement contained multitudes. Pride in his son's strength, rage at the necessity, grief for the childhood being systematically dismantled by forces beyond their control. Mitchell nodded, understanding the complex emotional terrain without requiring explicit articulation. The conversation transitioned to operational briefing, analysis of the pursuit intelligence gathered from captured operatives, revised security protocols for witness protection. The attackers were confirmed Division 17 assets operating with reduced official support but maintaining professional capabilities. Their identification of the Masons' location suggested sophisticated intelligence gathering rather than opportunistic discovery. Containment has been compromised, Mitchell acknowledged, addressing the fundamental security breach directly. We need to modify our approach. Conventional witness protection parameters are insufficient against this level of organized pursuit. The statement confirmed Jack's tactical assessment. They were facing specialized operators with training and resources that exceeded standard criminal threats. What's the alternative? Jack pressed strategic mind-generating and discarding options with automatic efficiency. Mitchell shared a tablet screen displaying facility schematics, remote location, mountainous terrain, extensive security and infrastructure. Special operations facility repurposed for high-value asset protection. Self-contained, defensible, isolated from civilian population. A fortress, Jack translated, recognizing the tactical advantages and psychological limitations of the proposed solution. Mitchell didn't dispute the characterization. The most secure option available outside military installations, completely off official records, known only to select personnel with appropriate clearance levels. They can't compromise what doesn't exist in documented form. The practical benefits were undeniable. Security parameters that would effectively eliminate external threat access, comprehensive protective measures, professional personnel with specialized training. The human cost was equally clear. Complete isolation for Lucas, removal from social development opportunities, confinement in institutional environment for indeterminate duration. How long? Jack demanded, core concern transcending tactical considerations. Mitchell's hesitation communicated uncomfortable reality. Minimum 6 months until initial trial phase. Likely 12 to 18 before proceedings conclude and threat assessment can be downgraded. Potentially 2 years of Lucas's childhood spent in glorified captivity, developing an artificial environment without normal social interactions. The magnitude of the sacrifice struck Jack with physical force. Nearly a quarter of his son's life to date, crucial developmental years. Formative experiences all conducted within security parameters rather than normal childhood contexts. The operational necessity warred with parental instinct protection, requiring damage of different kind. I need to discuss this with him. Mitchell appeared surprised by the statement, instinctive institutional response treating the child as subject rather than participant. Jack's expression hardened, non-negotiable, boundary established. He's 8 years old, not a package to be relocated without consultation. He's lost enough control over his life already. I won't take this decision away from him too. Mitchell conceded with professional grace, recognizing the moral authority of parental determination, even within security constraints. The concession shifted power dynamics subtly, acknowledging Jack's primary responsibility to his son's well-being above operational expedience, human factors prioritized over procedural efficiency. Jack approached Lucas with careful consideration, settling beside him on the utilitarian cot that had served as bed during their emergency shelter. They needed to talk about what happened and what would happen next. The words were inadequate to the conversation's gravity, but Lucas registered the significance through tone and posture, setting aside the tablet with preemptive resignation. Those men last night, they're the same kind of people from the quarry, aren't they? The insight demonstrated Lucas's developing pattern recognition, connecting current events to foundational trauma with perceptive accuracy. Jack confirmed with appropriate honesty, respecting his son's intelligence, while measuring information against emotional capacity. Yes, they work for the same people. They're trying to stop us from helping the FBI put the bad guys in jail. Lucas processed this with visible effort, young features concentrating on complex causality. So they'll keep coming after us. Jack wanted to offer false reassurance to promise absolute safety and imminent resolution. The temptation to lie warred with his commitment to age-appropriate honesty, to building trust through difficult truth rather than comforting fiction. They might. That's why Agent Mitchell wants to take us somewhere super secure, somewhere they definitely can't find us. Lucas considered this with the pragmatic assessment of a child who had adapted to extraordinary circumstances. Like a secret base, Jack smiled despite the situation's gravity, his son's resilience manifesting in capacity to frame danger within adventure narrative. Something like that, very remote, very secure. The simplification masked complex reality. Isolated facility designed for high-value protection, institutional environment with limited external contact. Essentially voluntary incarceration justified by external threat. Jack outlined basic parameters in age-appropriate terms, emphasizing security benefits while acknowledging lifestyle limitations. No regular school, no neighborhood friends, no normal routines like we had in Lakewood. Lucas absorbed this small features showing calculation beyond his years, weighing benefits against costs with premature maturity. Would we be safe? Really safe? The question penetrated to core concern, child's perspective, cutting through tactical assessments to fundamental priority. Jack offered the most honest answer possible, balancing reassurance against realistic assessment. As safe as anyone can make us. The best protection available. The qualification registered in Lucas's expression, recognition that absolute safety remained unattainable, that risk could be managed but never eliminated. This understanding belonged to adults, to combat veterans, to intelligence professionals, not to third graders who should be concerned with playground politics and multiplication tables, rather than relative security parameters. Will it make the bad men stop looking for us? Lucas pressed, seeking certainty where none existed. Jack resisted automatic reassurance, choosing measured honesty instead. It will make it much harder for them. And while we're there, the FBI will be working to catch all of them. Put them in jail where they can't hurt anyone. Lucas processed this connecting cause to effect with developing logical framework. How long, the question Jack had anticipated, had dreaded providing truthful answer. A long time, maybe a year, maybe more. Lucas's shoulders slumped, physical manifestation of spiritual defeat. His next words emerged quiet, resigned rather than rebellious. I'm never going to have a normal life again, am I? The question lanced through Jack's defenses, paternal protective instinct, colliding with operational reality. He gathered Lucas close physical comfort where verbal reassurance would ring false. That's not true, this won't last forever. We'll get through this, and then we'll build whatever kind of normal life you want. The promise felt simultaneously essential and tenuous, absolute in intent, uncertain in execution, dependent on factors beyond his control. Lucas accepted the embrace without resistance, but without his earlier desperate clinging, emotional adjustment already progressing toward premature self-containment. When do we leave? The practical question reflected emotional resignation, acceptance of inevitable displacement after multiple similar experiences. Soon. Tomorrow, maybe. The FBI is getting everything ready. Jack maintained physical connection as he outlined what little he knew about their destination. Mountain location, specialized facility, comprehensive services within security perimeter. Lucas listened with unnatural stillness, processing information without typical childhood questions or protests, adaptation mechanisms engaging with disturbing efficiency. What about my stuff? The question reflected natural childhood priorities, possessions representing stability and identity amid chaos and displacement. We had to leave it behind, buddy. Jack felt the admission like physical pain, another loss in accumulating collection. But they'll bring us new things, whatever you need. Lucas nodded, accepting this latest sacrifice with resignation born of repeated experience. Not the first possessions left behind, not the first attachments severed by necessity. The psychological impact of such repeated disruption would require professional intervention, long-term therapy to process compound trauma and develop healthy coping mechanisms. I just want my chess set, the one we play with on Tuesdays. Such a small request amid catastrophic disruption, continuity of single ritual, representing stability and connection. Jack felt simultaneously heartbroken at the modesty of the request and determined to fulfill it, regardless of operational complications. I'll make sure we get it, or one just like it. Chess on Tuesdays, no matter where we are. That's a promise I can keep. The commitment represented more than the specific object. Pledged to maintain emotional connection, familiar ritual, parent-child bond, despite external chaos. Lucas accepted this with cautious trust experience, having taught that circumstances could override promises regardless of parental intent. That afternoon, Agent Garcia arranged video conference with Dr. R. Winters, providing psychological support through secure communication channels. Jack observed the initial interaction from calculated distance, close enough to provide security presence, far enough to allow therapeutic privacy. Lucas engaged with surprising openness, established trust with the psychologist, facilitating authentic communication despite circumstantial barriers. Dr. Winters requested private consultation with Jack, following Lucas's session. Professional assessment delivered with compassionate directness. He's exhibiting signs of adjustment disorder, with anxiety features possibly developing post-traumatic stress, manageable with proper intervention, but concerning given his developmental stage. The clinical terminology masked simple truth. Lucas was being damaged by their circumstances, adapting in ways that protected immediate functioning while potentially compromising long-term emotional health. What's the treatment recommendation? Jack pressed parental concern transcending operational parameters. Dr. Winters outlined comprehensive approach, regular therapy, structured routine within security constraints, maintenance of father-son attachment as primary protective factor, consistency wherever possible, honest communication about circumstances, age-appropriate inclusion in decision-making to preserve sense of agency. The guidance aligned with Jack's instinctive approach, but validated professional framework, offering structure for navigating complex psychological terrain without formal training. He thanked her with genuine appreciation, arranging continued consultation throughout their relocation and subsequent containment. Transport to the secure facility occurred before dawn. Convoy of unmarked vehicles, circuitous route, counter-surveillance measures employed with professional thoroughness. Lucas slept through initial movement, physical exhaustion, and emotional depletion, facilitating unconsciousness despite uncomfortable circumstances. Jack maintained vigilant observation. Tactical awareness engaged despite confident security measures. The journey required 8 hours transition between vehicles occurring at predetermined intervals, final approach via helicopter to remote landing zone. Lucas watched the mountainous landscape pass beneath them with subdued interest. Natural childhood fascination with aircraft muted by contextual understanding of their purpose and destination. The facility materialized against rugged terrain, architectural design emphasizing defensive integration with natural features, structures partially embedded in mountainside, multiple security perimeters visible from approach vector, armed personnel, positioned at strategic intervals, surveillance systems covering all potential access routes. A fortress disguised as research station government installation repurposed for specialized security application. Jack assessed defensive parameters automatically. Kill zones observation post-response protocols evident in personnel positioning. Comprehensive protection exceeding standard witness security measures appropriate to threat profile they faced. Interior spaces presented stark contrast to external fortifications. Comfortable furnishings, natural lighting where architectural design permitted deliberate efforts to create living environment rather than institutional confinement. Their assigned quarters occupied two connecting rooms, sleeping areas, small sitting space, private bathroom with standard fixtures. Institutional functionality softened by residential details, colorful bedding area rug bookshelf stocked with age-appropriate reading material. The facility administrator, introduced as Director Collins, provided orientation briefing outlining schedule resources, limitations, and expectations. Daily routine would include educational sessions, physical activities, psychological support, and recreational periods, all conducted within security perimeter under professional supervision. Approximately 30 personnel staffed the facility combination of security specialists and support services. 3 other protected witnesses currently in residence, housed in separate sections with limited interaction permitted under supervised conditions. A small community of displaced persons connected by circumstance rather than choice, existing in artificial environment, while external legal processes determine their eventual fate. Lucas absorbed the information with characteristic quiet observation, processing details without comment or complaint. His emotional withdrawal concerned Jack more than any explicit protest might have. Adaptation progressing toward protective detachment rather than healthy integration of experience. Their first evening is established tentative routine, dinner in small dining area, brief exploration of permitted facility sections, settling into assigned quarters with practiced efficiency. Lucas arranged his minimal possessions with careful attention, creating personal space within institutional constraints, small gestures of control amid circumstances that offered little autonomy. Night brought expected challenges, unfamiliar surroundings triggering hypervigilance. Lucas waking from nightmares that combined recent pursuit with foundational trauma. From the quarry incident, Jack responded with consistent presence, physical reassurance, verbal grounding techniques taught by Dr. Winters during preliminary consultation. Days expanded into weeks, routine establishing structure within confinement. Lucas participated in educational sessions with the facility's teacher, individualized curriculum, maintaining academic progress despite institutional constraints. Physical activity occupied scheduled periods. Indoor gymnasium, supervised outdoor recreation within innermost security perimeter, structured exercise designed to address physical development requirements. Jack integrated into facility operations where security protocols permitted applying professional skills to defensive assessment and procedural review. The activity provided purpose beyond passive protection, utilizing operational experience while maintaining primary focus on Lucas's well-being and adjustment. Communication with the outside world occurred through strictly controlled channels. Weekly updates from Agent Mitchell regarding case progression, scheduled video conferences with Dr. R. Winters for psychological support. Occasional messages from Lucas's teacher in Lakewood conveyed through multiple security filters. 1 month into their containment, Mitchell's update included significant development. Rebecca Wright had recovered sufficiently to provide formal deposition testimony recorded for trial presentation to eliminate future exposure risk. The information represented procedural progress, but highlighted extended timeline remaining before resolution. Legal machinery grinding forward with institutional pace, regardless of human costs accumulating during prolonged proceedings. Lucas adapted to facility routine with concerning efficiency, compliance replacing childhood's natural resistance observation, supplanting curiosity acceptance, substituting for protest. The adjustment facilitated daily functioning, but raised developmental concerns, premature maturity, serving immediate coping at potential expense of normal emotional progression. Jack discussed these concerns during private consultation with Dr. Winters, parental worry transcending operational parameters. He's too quiet, too accepting. It's like he's given up on normal life, resigned himself to this reality. The psychologist acknowledged the observation while providing contextual framework. Adaptive response to circumstances beyond his control. The compliance is concerning but also protective, conserving emotional resources for long-term survival rather than exhausting them in futile resistance. The assessment was professionally sound but emotionally unsatisfying. Clinical explanation failing to address fundamental wrongness of childhood shaped by institutional confinement and security protocols rather than natural development processes. Jack's frustration manifested in renewed commitment to creating normalcy within abnormal circumstances, maintaining traditions, celebrating milestones, preserving childhood wherever possible, despite environmental limitations. Chess on Tuesdays became sacred ritual, dedicated time regardless of facility schedule connection to previous life, maintained through specific activity. Jack located art supplies through facility resources, encouraging creative expression where verbal processing proved difficult. He established reading time each evening, worked with the facility teacher to celebrate academic achievements, documented growth with photographs that couldn't be shared but would preserve memories for eventual return to normal life. 3 months into their containment, Mitchell's update included significant development. Walter Kent Division 17's operational director had accepted plea agreement in exchange for comprehensive testimony against higher-level officials. The cooperation dramatically accelerated legal proceedings, potential resolution timelines shifting from years to months. The information ignited cautious hope. First concrete indication that their confinement might conclude earlier than worst-case projections, that Lucas might return to normal developmental environment before further critical growth periods were compromised. Jack shared carefully measured version with Lucas, balancing hope against potential disappointment if his circumstances changed. 5 months after facility arrival, trial proceedings began against primary defendants, congressional representatives, Defense Department officials, private contractors who had facilitated Division 17's extrajudicial operations. Mitchell provided regular updates as prosecution presented evidence, including Rebecca Wright's recorded testimony and comprehensive documentation assembled through federal investigation. Jack's recorded testimony was presented during third trial week. Deposition taken within facility security parameters, eliminating transportation risk, while fulfilling evidentiary requirements. Lucas observed the preparation process with somber understanding, comprehending the connection between his father's statements and their continued confinement without requiring explicit explanation. As proceedings continued, security assessments began incorporating potential resolution scenarios, graduated reduction in protection levels as threat sources were systematically neutralized through legal process. Preliminary planning for post-containment transition initiated, considering options for eventual return to civilian life under modified identity parameters. 6 months into facility confinement, jury deliberation began in the primary case. 12 citizens evaluating evidence against powerful defendants, determining consequences for systemic abuse of governmental authority. The waiting period intensified, an accumulated tension outcome, uncertainty amplifying psychological pressure despite physical security. Verdict announcement came during facility dinner service. Mitchell's call patched through secure communication system information, delivered directly to administrative staff with Jack and Lucas present by specific request. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing pending, but conviction secured. Conspiracy exposed, primary threat sources neutralized through legal process rather than operational action. The news represented fundamental transition point. Threat profile significantly reduced, though not eliminated, protection requirements, shifting from absolute containment toward modified security parameters. Mitchell outlined preliminary transition plan, continued protection, but with potential for limited community integration, educational options beyond facility resources, graduated return toward normalized living conditions. Jack shared the development with Lucas in their quarters that evening, measured explanation of implications and potential changes. Lucas received the information with characteristic caution, experience having taught that improvements could reverse without warning That hope required careful management against disappointment's damage. Does this mean we can leave here? The question contained multitudes: desire for freedom, fear of change, uncertainty about what normal might mean after extended institutional experience. Jack balanced honesty against premature commitment, parental instinct navigating complex reality. Not right away, but soon probably. And when we do leave, we'll have more choices about where we go and what we do. The qualified response registered in Lucas's expression: cautious optimism tempered by experiential wisdom beyond his years. Will we still be Chris and Christopher Mason? Or can we be ourselves again? The question penetrated to core identity concern: whether authentic selfhood could be reclaimed after extended performance of manufactured identity. Jack considered carefully weighing security implications against psychological impact. That depends on a lot of things. But eventually, yes, I think we can be ourselves again. Lucas absorbed this processing complex future potential with remarkable comprehension. I'm not sure I remember how to be Lucas Reeves anymore. The admission struck Jack with physical force, fundamental identity disruption, expressed with child's directness, complex psychological impact distilled to essential truth. His response emerged from parental core rather than tactical calculation. You're still Lucas Reeves. You've always been, no matter what name we've used. And I've always been your dad, no matter what anyone called me. The affirmation represented absolute truth amid circumstantial compromise. Core identity maintained beneath necessary adaptations. Fundamental relationship preserved despite external pressures. Lucas accepted this with visible emotional response. First tears in months breaking through adaptive detachment, genuine connection, penetrating protective withdrawal. Jack gathered him close, physical comfort transcending verbal reassurance, shared vulnerability, creating space for authentic emotion rather than performed composure. It's okay to be confused, to be scared about what happens next. I am too, sometimes. But we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured out everything else. The moment marked transition point, from survival orientation toward recovery, perspective, from endurance toward healing, from passive acceptance toward active participation in determining their future. The path ahead remained complex with numerous challenges and uncertain timeline, but fundamental shift had occurred in their orientation toward that future. 1 month after verdict announcement, Mitchell presented comprehensive transition plan: relocation to moderate security housing in small Montana community, continued protection at reduced intensity, gradual integration into civilian environment with professional support throughout adjustment process. The proposal balanced security requirements against psychological needs, particularly Lucas's developmental considerations after extended institutional confinement. The plan included options for eventual identity resolution, potential return to original names following complete threat neutralization through sentencing, and incarceration of all primary actors, or permanent maintenance of Mason identities with modified background parameters, allowing greater authenticity while preserving security. Jack discussed the possibilities with Lucas, age-appropriate explanation of choices and implications, genuine inclusion in decision-making process. The conversation represented significant departure from previous necessity-driven relocations, options rather than imperatives, choices rather than commands, agency rather than compliance. Montana transition occurred during early spring mountain landscape emerging from winter dormancy as they emerged from institutional confinement. Their new residents balanced security with normalcy, standard home with enhanced protective measures, regular community interaction with prudent precautions, graduated return to conventional living patterns. Lucas entered local school with appropriate support, educational assessment determining optimal placement, psychological resources addressing transition. Challenges: social integration facilitated through structured introduction. Initial adjustment presented expected difficulties. Institutional behaviors requiring modification. Social skills, demanding development, academic performance, temporarily affected by environmental change. Jack maintained consistent supportive presence throughout the transition process as balancing protective instinct against developmental requirements, facilitating independence while ensuring security. Their relationship evolved from survival, partnership, toward healthier parent-child dynamic mutual dependence, gradually resolving toward appropriate developmental boundaries. 5 years after the quarry incident, legal proceedings finally concluded. All principal defendants sentenced, conspiracy thoroughly dismantled, threat assessment downgraded to minimal concern. Mitchell presented final resolution options during scheduled consultation: complete release from witness protection with return to original identities, or permanent adoption of established Mason identities with removal of remaining operational restrictions. The decision required serious consideration. Lucas, now 13, having spent 5 formative years as Chris Mason, developing identity and connections under that name. Return to Lucas Reeves would require explaining complex history to social connections, potentially disrupting established relationships, revisiting traumatic experiences through necessary disclosures. Jack presented the options without predetermined outcome, respecting Lucas's maturity and personal investment in the decision. Considerations extended beyond practical concerns to fundamental questions of identity and authenticity: who they had been, who they had become, who they would choose to be moving forward. After careful consideration, family consultation with Dr. Winter's continued support, they chose middle path, maintaining Mason identities in public contexts while privately reclaiming original names, truths shared selectively with closest connections on rather than broadly disclosed. The compromise honored both past and present, acknowledging complex reality of lives interrupted and reconstructed through extraordinary circumstances. Tuesday evening, 5 years from their original displacement, found Jack and Lucas, privately using original names while publicly maintaining established identities, standing in the cereal aisle of their local grocery store. The routine shared characteristics with their pre-trauma tradition while incorporating adaptations from intervening experiences. Lucas, now teenaged with lengthening limbs and deepening voice, selected cereal with deliberate consideration rather than childhood impulse. The difference represented normal developmental progression rather than trauma response, natural maturation rather than forced adaptation. Jack watched with quiet appreciation for ordinary teenage behavior emerging from extraordinary circumstances. Dad, Lucas began as they moved through familiar routine. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't helped Rebecca that night, if we just walked away? The question represented healthy processing rather than rumination, curiosity rather than fixation, integration of experience rather than traumatic preoccupation. Jack considered thoughtfully, respecting the question's legitimacy. Sometimes. But I couldn't have lived with myself, and I wouldn't want to teach you that walking away was the right choice when someone needed help. Lucas nodded, absorbing the perspective with adolescent seriousness. I think about it too, not wishing it different exactly, just wondering. The capacity to engage with pivotal experience without being consumed by it demonstrated psychological recovery, past events informing rather than defining present identity. Jack recognized the healthy integration with profound gratitude, professional intervention, and personal resilience, combining to facilitate recovery that had once seemed distant possibility rather than achievable outcome. They completed shopping with comfortable conversation, loaded grocery bags, drove home through familiar community where they had established genuine connections despite necessary boundaries around complete disclosure. The house they shared had become true home rather than tactical location. Personal history accumulated through ordinary experiences rather than extraordinary disruptions. That night, after typical evening routine of homework supervision and shared activities, Jack paused in Lucas's doorway, observing his son engaged in reading. Ordinary teenage behavior in ordinary setting, remarkable only in contrast to what might have been under different resolution. The journey from that restroom confrontation to present moment had traversed extraordinary terrain: trauma and recovery, danger and safety, institutional confinement, and community integration. Throughout that journey, the central commitment had remained constant: protection transcending physical safety to encompass psychological well-being, development of resilience, rather than mere survival. Jack Reeves had promised Rachel to teach their son bravery rather than fearlessness, commitment fulfilled through circumstances neither could have anticipated. Lucas had learned courage through direct experience, resilience through necessity, strength through adversity, navigated with appropriate support rather than isolation. The lessons came at significant cost, childhood partially sacrificed to extraordinary circumstances, normal development interrupted by necessary adaptations. The outcome represented qualified success rather than unmitigated victory, trauma managed rather than erased experiences, integrated rather than forgotten strength, developed through damage rather than preserved through prevention. In a final assessment, they had survived intact, not unchanged, not unscarred, but fundamentally whole despite forces that might have destroyed them. The accomplishment deserved acknowledgement without romanticization. Hard-won resilience valued without glorifying the adversity that necessitated its development. Lucas looked up from his book, catching his father's observation teenage features, showing momentary vulnerability beneath developing composure. "You okay, Dad?" The question reflected natural role reversal of advancing adolescence, child beginning to demonstrate concern for parent rather than exclusively receiving protective attention. Jack smiled, genuine emotion breaking through habitual vigilance. "I'm good, buddy, just thinking about how far we've come." Lucas returned the smile with adolescent self-consciousness, authentic connection, penetrating age-appropriate reserve. "Yeah, we did pretty good considering everything." The understated assessment contained profound truth, quiet acknowledgement of extraordinary journey navigated without surrender to circumstances that might have broken lesser spirits. Jack nodded, accepting the evaluation with equal measure of pride and humility. "That's one way to put it. I'd say we did better than good. We did what mattered. We stayed together, stayed ourselves underneath everything else." Lucas considered this thoughtfulness reflecting developing maturity. Even when we had different names, we were still us. The observation demonstrated fundamental resilience, core identity maintained despite external pressures, authentic selfhood preserved beneath necessary adaptations. Jack confirmed with conviction, born of shared experience rather than theoretical assertion. Always. No matter what happened around us or what anyone called us. The truth represented ultimate victory against forces that had sought to destroy them. Physical survival, achieved psychological integrity, maintained relationship preserved and strengthened rather than damaged through trauma. The accomplishment transcended tactical success to achieve strategic triumph, not merely surviving danger, but emerging from adversity with essential humanity intact.